shows me up in 2 minutes.
Oh, I didn't break it.
Well, who knows?
Thank you.
We'll
Yeah,
start.
I showed 2 minutes also.
That's off.
Now we get you some water.
No, he's on it.
I'll get you some water.
No.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay.
Riley, you want anything?
Oh. No. I just forgot. I usually have someone help me do it, and I don't have any help, so I forgot.
I get you.
They're getting some, I heard.
I think Colleen's getting it.
Okay, we're ready. On record.
Good evening. Welcome to the new year of the City of Lincoln City City Council meeting, Monday, January 28th, 2018 at 6 p.m. If you wish to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item, please sign up at the sheet near the entrance door to the council chambers. You'll be called to speak during the public comments section. Comments or testimonies on agenda items listed under public hearing, public comment will be taken at that time. Roll call, please.
Mayor Williams.
Here.
Dick Anderson.
Yes.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Deanna Hinton.
Here.
Judy Casper. Here. Susan Walke.
Here.
And Kip Ward.
Here. Thank you. Do you please all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We've had a request for change.
Yes,
Councilor Walke?
Your Honor, I move to add an item to the agenda, a number 11 under K, Special Order of Business, which would be the appointment to the Arts Committee.
To now. You want to move it to now? Yes? Okay, you just said move it.
Oh, to add it.
Okay. All right. Do you want to take care of that right now? Right?
No,
Just move it on the agenda.
I just want to put
Oh.
it on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Add it to the Special Order of Business, last item.
Well, if you don't mind, this is one of those I think we talked about before, that, I don't know, we need a lot of discussion. No, she's not even here.
She's not here, but these,
But she wanted to be here for it, or?
no, but it's usually done under.
Feel free, help me out here.
Just didn't make it to the agenda, so we just want to add it onto the agenda.
Right, so what I'm saying is, we could just knock it out now and be done with it in case she wants to show and doesn't need to sit here for 2 hours.
She's not here.
Okay, fair enough. We need a second on that.
Second.
Motion is second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. All right. And then we roll through consent agenda. Minutes of meeting, May 1st, 2017. Minutes of joint work session meeting for May 15th, 2017. Minutes of joint work session for June 5th, 2017. Regular meeting, minutes of regular meeting, August 14th, 2017, 6 p.m. Application OLCC, new outlet, full on-premises sales, commercial license.
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
I wonder, Mr. City Manager, perhaps this would be a good time to give an explanation on the age of some of those minutes we just approved.
Most of those minutes that you approve are associated with work meetings, work sessions that we've had. We've worked to stay up on the regular ones, so we have those minutes that would need to be, but most of these have been for the work session.
Sounds good. Thank you.
May I add that some of those minutes were some of them that we had issues with, like there was no, the audio wasn't working for the May 1st minutes, and there were some issues with our software because we were just starting the new software, so.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Council deliberations, nothing. Comments from citizens present on agenda and non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to bring to the council's attention any item not listed on the agenda for public hearing or public comment. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per citizen, and the city recorder will use the light system. Speakers may not yield their times to others, and as a general rule, this is not a time for exchange of questions. At the conclusion of this agenda item, a councilor may discuss or raise questions regarding an item presented by a citizen. The mayor has the authority to reduce the time allowed for comment in accordance with the number of persons present and signed up to speak. Warren? Please. Either seat, just, the microphone's, oh, I guess there's only one chair up there, so you just pull up a chair and, that'll be fine, sure. Promise. And just an FYI, normally you'll want to give this stuff to the city recorder ahead of the meeting, and they'll have this ready for us.
Warren, could you give one of those to the city recorder there? Thank you.
All right, so have a seat, pull up a microphone, give us your name, and have at it.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting me,
Pull it closer.
thank you for letting me come to talk to you today. And I think you're doing a great job, and you don't probably get enough credit for that.
Warren, give us your name for the record.
Warren Halcott.
Thank you.
And I do want to talk about safety at crosswalks in Lincoln City. I sort of have a passion for this because I've seen it in action and I see it work really well. These flags are important part of this whole thing. What they are placed at each side of the crosswalk, and then when people are going to cross, they grab a flag and then they put it in, go use the flag and then put it in the flag, same type of a container on the other side. And what they do is they become visible. That's the important thing. People see these people crossing the street, but people wear dark clothes, the light is different at different times, the traffic flow is such and such, and they don't expect to see people in the road. So this tells the people that are driving that there's something going on the road, and it needs to be there, I think. Basically, the kind of road we have, I'm talking about 101, because it's the one that's important that we get that right. I don't even know the statistics of what you have with injuries. Do you have any numbers? But
We can get that for if you want.
I'll tell you my experience, and then you can work from that, I think. Basically, in Kirkland, 11 years ago, 10 years ago, I was working in Kirkland, Washington, and I had to cross this, what was it, East Lake Washington Boulevard, which is much worse than 101 is in terms of traffic. It's a 4-lane highway, goes right through the middle of Kirkland. Well, at this one place, it was it was between block crosswalk, like many of the ones in Lincoln City, and I had to cross it, and I said, "This is nuts. This is crazy crossing this thing," because they're coming in from different directions at this light, and it's really not safe because people could be going 45 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, 30 in that range. It didn't matter if the light was. The arrow said you had a green light. They were going as fast as they could, and they were not able to stop at the time to get to that intersection. But if they didn't see anybody, and who sees people as much without a flag? Well, it worked. It worked. I got the statistics on the city of Kirkland. That intersection had 89 injury accidents in a year, the year before they put the flags out, and 0 the year after they put the flags up. 0. And they had 2 deaths that year as well. So, not a small thing. Not a small thing. I noticed this weekend crossing 101, it wasn't crossing 101, but I saw a family of 2 parents and 2 children, little children, and they were trying to cross at one of those type of crosswalks. And they ended up, had to be split up, and one because the kids got a little bit, they had to be picked up. And so the mother and the one went that way, and the other one had to go back, retreat, to get across the street and wait to do that. They couldn't go together. So, dangerous. And one final thing is that there are 3 cities in this state that have flags, and it's worth looking into to find out what it's been doing. Portland has them, Astoria has them, and Sisters has them. So there's something to look at. And I definitely have a passion for protecting grandchildren and stuff like that. It's important. That's it.
Well, thank you, Warren, appreciate that. Sure.
Lincoln City actually had those flags in the past. And for some, I've always was a supporter of it. Seemed to me just to make sense. Sorry. We might take a look at why those flags didn't work for Lincoln City and see if we could make them work for Lincoln City. Because I'm not certain of the reason they took them down.
What was the time span? Do you remember? How long did it take?
Warren, can I ask a favor, get close to
Oh,
the
what was the time span of the?
It would just be a guess. It was like in the early 90s and late 90s. Is that when? Oh, you guys remember, so yeah. That was my question, but they'll finish my question.
Well, how many crosswalks were guarded by that?
Well, we can
least
get into
one.
that, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I would say the one thing that I'd heard was that it was simply the flags kept disappearing. Now, that could be just anecdotal, and my reply is, well, if I were a business owner there, I'd love to have my name on those flags and have it disappear, and I'd replace him.
Well, that's probably the problem. You don't want to have, I didn't mean to.
So, no, but what I'd suggest is, because we really don't want to get into debate here tonight, but maybe if you want to do a little legwork, talk to some of those businesses at those intersections and say, hey, would you be willing to participate in this on some level? And then we start talking to ODOT and see what we can do. But I'd say don't let it die.
Well, Astoria got theirs out.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Sisters just fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, yeah, the homework that I sent you answers that question about what happens to the stolen ones.
Yeah. Anyway, stay in contact. Do you want your flags back?
I do, in case they're
Okay.
not put up. I
Absolutely.
want to have something to go across the street with.
Yeah. No, I
Thanks.
totally agree. Thank you for your presentation.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
to continue on the subject, I've had the conversation with the Chamber, and they're very interested in this topic as well.
Right.
So, Mr. Walcott, if perhaps visiting with the Chamber, spending some time with them.
Warren, did you hear what Councilor Anderson said? No. Okay. He had a suggestion for you.
The Chamber of Commerce is pursuing the same topic and have the same concern, so you'd find an ally there. If you visited with them, maybe you could team up, because they're also very interested in the same topic, and they know the hurdles dealing with a state highway, not the city. There's a difference, but we'd love to be an ally and carry your water. Right.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Warren. Well done. Okay, Diane, I've got you down as K3, and I don't have a K3. I've got a K7, 8, 9, 10. So you just want to wait until we get to K? Or do you want to talk about it now? Okay. Well, now, okay. Well, yeah, now would be a good time. No, well, we've got public hearings, public comment at H, so. All right, real good. All right, John, you want to come up now?
Hi, everybody. I'm John Forrest, 1820 Northeast West Devils Lake Road, Lincoln City. Justin Werner came in here about 2 weeks ago. I was working out of town and kind of started the subject of the of the problem. An event, the rival promoter had an event and used the city park without permits and insurance and blah, blah, blah. Although I've been held to that standard for 13 years, apparently they were told, go ahead. So I'm the founder director of the Nell Scott Reef Big Wave Classic Series, including the Nell Scott Reef Invitational, a qualifying event for the Nell Scott Reef Big Wave Classic Invitational, an event founded by myself in 2005 with a cash purse, and this season a worldwide webcast of the event, putting Lincoln City and Nell Scott Reef on the international stage once again. In the past 13 years I have run the event, I've paid over $15,000 for the special event permit and insurance covering Canyon City Park, and hired safety and traffic and parking crews as required by that permit to accommodate the extra traffic that such an event brings. The safety crew also protects and monitors the public from the big waves and tidal surges that frequently flood the city ramp, forcing spectators off the beach onto the park. This crew also keeps competitors and the public off the private property adjacent to the park. In 2014, the city granted my rival group, led by a dismissed employee of mine, Adam Wagner, a permit for the park, during which they invaded the adjacent private condominium property to have their champagne celebration, unbeknownst to the absentee owner, Gary Wardrip, who was outraged and filed a complaint with the police department. I showed the social media pictures of their trespass at a previous city council meeting to councilors, mayor, city manager, and personally to the BCB director. Curiously, that same rival group has listed that property's address as our event headquarters for future events. When the owner of the condo was notified, he had no previous knowledge of that and was outraged at the boldness of this group and filed another complaint. Last year, during one of our events, Jim Coos, Ed Drystad, and Ron Chandler showed up at our event to check it out, and Ron drifted over to that same private property and was promptly warned off the property by my head of security, Steve Lee, back there in the corner. He's been with me every year, making sure none of the spectators get hurt in the surf, or and the city traffic and the parking is all in order. Steve and the crew have been diligent about their duties, both with the traffic, protecting private property, and ocean safety during these events. This season, after I secured the 2 permits for my event and the corresponding insurance to protect the city, Ed Drystad told the rival group of Adam Wagner, Gabe Smith, and Eric Akaskalian that they didn't need a permit and to go ahead and run their event. Nothing has changed for the special events permit requirements in the 13 years I have run the event, so what prompted the change by Ed Drystad? The rival group's running an event on November 29th out of the city park with no permit, insurance, safety, or traffic crew manifested itself in spectators getting rolled by a log on the city ramp, which could have been fatal, not to mention a major lawsuit against the city for negligence in protecting the public from known hazards during these big swell events with high tides. During these swell events, there is nowhere else to go but retreat to the park. That rival group availed themselves of the city park for staging their event, as proven by the pictures of jet skis, competitors, and photo staff in the park. I was told that parking tickets were issued for event competitors that clogged the right-of-way. Once again, that issue is covered by the special event permit that was successful for 13-plus years, but ignored by the BCB for this event. Unfortunately, due to the problems, I have had to suspend my event for a second time until we get clarification on the legals moving forward. As a result of this confusion, a grant of $15,000 was bestowed on me by the VCC, and it will be unavailable to our event if this isn't dealt with soon, as our event's waiting period for a proper contest-worthy swell is over in March and the grant will expire. I have already missed one opportunity to run this event because of the aforementioned rival events mishaps and the VCB's confusion of legals. I suggest a more detailed but open meeting with appropriate parties with Chief Killian, Ron Chandler, Ed Drystad, and Jim Coos of the North Lincoln Fire and Rescue for safety input for appropriate remedies. It's going on, and it just goes on and on and on. When is this going to stop? Somebody's going to die. The coroner's going to be the next official that's going to be there. Nobody's doing anything about it. I am when I run my event. So why aren't these guys held to the same standards I am? I think there should be I think there should be a smaller committee meeting where we can get this ironed out, and I know what's going on moving forward. This isn't right. This is bad, and it can reflect on the city really bad. You guys are going to get sued. The city is going to get sued.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Anyone else who did not sign up but wishes to come up and speak at this time?
Georgia Roloff. I just want to let everybody know that on Thursday, the League of Women Voters is going to have their monthly meeting right here in Lincoln City, as opposed to Newport, and it's going to be at the Driftwood Library, and it will feature Patrick Alexander from the Warming Shelter and our own Bill Hall, County Commissioner. Should be a lively conversation, light refreshments, and everyone is welcome. Thursday, the 11th at 11:30. Please show up. Should be good.
George, may I ask a question? That's
Please.
a state group, or is that a national?
League of Women Voters is national, but this is the county, Lincoln County
Okay.
League of Women Voters. And by the way, it is also membership for men as well, not just for women.
Oh, good news.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Okay, moving on. Presentation, Police Facility Project Update Report.
Evening, Mayor and City Council. Rather than me try to regurgitate what the professionals behind me are going to do, I'm just going to turn it straight over to them. Ian Gilbert and Troy Ainsworth of FFA Architect. As you're aware, these are the architects that we have under contract for our police facility project, and they'd like to spend a few minutes and update you on our progress. So I'll turn it over to them right away.
Hello, I'm Ian Gilbert with FFA Architecture and Interiors. I'm the project manager and design lead for the new Public Safety Center.
I'm Troy Ainsworth, principal with FFA. I'll be the architect of record for the police project.
Thank you. If you could, just a reminder, just keep the mics close to you. Yep. Thanks. So everyone can hear you at all.
Fair enough. So what we're here to do today is to give you an update on the progress that we've made so far. What we've been focusing our energy on to date is basically doing research, primarily on what the needs for the police facility are, as well as what the ramifications of the site that we've chosen and the challenges that may be associated with that, as well as reaching out to the community to get their input on how this facility should represent them as a community. So just as a reminder of our schedule,
Yeah,
hard to see there.
Can't see that. Jim done this. Sorry to interrupt. Right on the grades, that's very good on for old items. Thank you. Thank you.
So this is the work that we've completed to date. We've had interviews with staff as well as the chief and his folks, with ourselves and our out-of-town partner, who's the police facility expert out of Phoenix. Basically, we're focused on learning about what functions need to take place within the building. And then we have also done a community engagement session at the community hall, I guess, community center, thank you, which several of you were able to attend. So just as a reminder, this is our overall process. We have kickoff work that we did with you during work session. We have the research phase that I'm about to talk about now. Following that, we'll have basically begin putting pen to paper and start the schematic design process of actually figuring out what this facility looks like and lays out to be. And then design development is where we get into more detail, where it's down to figuring out how many drawers go in a cabinet and things like that. And for construction documents is when we actually detail the building to prepare for permits and construction. So as a reminder, these are the project goals that we established with you in work session. This was part of our kickoff meeting. Essentially, the highlighted words are the things that we gravitate to most. Stronger connection between the police force and the community. The building should be functional, sustainable, modern, and resilient. The project should highlight community resources, materials, and character. Should be respectful and approachable atmosphere, balanced with safety and secure needs. Flexible work environments that can adapt to changes in technology, policing, and infrastructure. And the building should help attract and retain talented, award-winning staff. Staff should feel proud to go work there. I think, as you'll find as I go through the presentation, the community echoes most of these sentiments. So during the research phase, we do what we call programming, which is to understand the functions of the building. So this slide is a little bit hard to see. I apologize, but these are the various parts that go into the police station. So police administration is simply what it is. It's the chief's office and administrative functions of the police building. Patrol is the technical aspects of the building. This is everything from, this is what happens when a police officer arrives at the back door of the police station with potentially a suspect in custody, and everything that goes along with that, which includes holding cells and evidence and report writing areas and all of those types of functions. Common areas are the more public functions of the building, which include lobby, community rooms, those types of functions, bathrooms. Criminal investigations is the investigative wing of the department. And then dispatch is the 911 call center. This is the general arrangement of how those things relate to each other. Essentially, the public lobby is on the secure side of things. Records is what generally relates to that space as almost like reception, as well as record keeping throughout the facility. They also work with the police admin, particularly the chief's office, as support. On the patrol side, this is where, like I said, somebody comes in the back door, the more secure side of the facility. Their lockers are near there. The evidence property is also near there because you don't want to go too far with the evidence. You want to maintain chain of custody. Investigations wants to be close by to patrol relatively because there is cross-collaboration when someone is working on a case and they have a chance to run into someone who's been just come in from a call. There's an opportunity to learn something new from a coworker. And then dispatch feels somewhat removed from the day-to-day functions, but it does have oversight over the lobby, which really should bring it back around to this side, so that after hours, if someone comes into the lobby, dispatch is there 24/7. They have an ability to overlook the lobby and help somebody come in if they're under duress. So in doing these square footages, the very first pass at this, line items out each of the various square footages for each department, and then we figure out what's called a grossing factor, which means the hallways, the walls, anything that's thick that isn't necessarily where someone's going to be standing, that all goes into a grossing factor, which gives you a total square footage of 27,000 square feet. In addition to that programming effort, we also look at what's required across the site for secure parking of patrol vehicles as well as staff, non-secure parking for public, the circulation factor for all of them to move around the site, the driveways and pedestrian circulation, and then any outbuildings or storage buildings that we have, or storage areas, I should say, that we have, and the total that we're targeting is 2.25. So this is the first pass at this, and there's going to be a lot of pushing and pulling on that to make sure that we're right-sizing the facility. So it's in the works. Any questions relative to this so far? So the next thing we do is we analyze the site. So as a reminder, I'm sure you all know, that the existing police station is here, and we have always assumed that we have this parcel here and the southern half of the overall parcel that's located here. And, you know, backing up into this wooded area is a really fantastic site. We're actually really excited to be working in the area. Feel it's the right representation of what it means to be at the coast and be connected to that kind of landscape. So in looking at that, we did analysis of basically the vegetation wall, which is this light green area here. And then this light blue area represents the tsunami zone, and that sort of ends right about here and comes back up. And then the long blue line here is the wetland zone. The lines here represent the contours of the site or the grade of the site. That's probably the biggest challenge relative to this particular area, is that there's a lot of grade change. Makes it great for keeping the building out of the tsunami, but not so great in terms of finding flat land to be able to build something simple. When looking at that and you take the existing program, or the program that we talked about, this orange block, just very diagrammatically, represents the amount of space for a two-story facility of the 27,000 square feet. The blue line, or the blue area here, represents the amount of usable site area we need for the parking, the circulation, and things like that. So when you overlay that with the existing building, which we're going to try and keep in place and operational during construction, and you factor in the grades, it's going to be a challenge. But we're up for challenges. These are some basic climate information relative to the site. This shallow line represents the arc of the sun during the winter months. Actually, sorry, summer months here. This shallow one represents the winter months. And then in between is the spring equinox. And basically, we're looking at the amount of sun that we can gather for the building. Basically, trying to position spaces so that they get the most direct sunlight where it's appropriate, or shade the building in the best way to prevent heat gain when we don't want it. Honestly, the biggest driver of that is going to be just the amount of trees we have around the site. So getting access to sunlight in the right spots, but shading it in the right way will be something we'll explore as we move into design. These graphs here basically are showing the amount of precipitation you have relative to the month of the year. Obviously, like a lot of Oregon, beginning in October, or usually Halloween, things get really kind of wet, and then it tapers back off as we get into the spring months. And then obviously the cloud cover has a tendency to increase through June, July, August, December, or September, and then tapers off in the other months. Actually, I think I have that reversed. Okay. Reverse that. This diagram represents the amount of wind that hits the site and where its direction is coming from. This data is something that I think we need to do a little bit deeper dive on, because the wind data is coming out of Newport. There wasn't as local a source as we would have liked to have had. But generally what it's telling us is that most of the summer winds come out of the north-northeast, and that's pretty typical for most of Oregon. Even in the valley, most of the cooling winds come out of the northwest. Or sorry, that's what I meant, northwest. Spring winds are coming out of the southwest, but the primary winter winds are coming out of the east, which those of you who live here might have a better sense of that. Primary storms would seem like they more likely come out of the west in the winter, but I'm not necessarily an expert on that. But this is the data that we've gotten out of as close as we can find. Looking at adjacent uses around our site, we have basically light industrial here, the city shops, as well as the storage units and things located here. Obviously, the green represents the residential uses, and then the fire station and the the post office here. Usually, the primary concern when developing a police facility is the impact of sirens and traffic relative to neighbors in residential areas. This building has been here and functioning as a police station for a while, so I would imagine that we don't anticipate a lot of problems relative to that. Site circulation, so bringing traffic in and out. The orange line represents vehicle traffic. The blue lines represent pedestrian traffic. The biggest challenge relative to this is that traditionally when you're planning a new police facility, you're always looking for two ways out of the parking area in case for some reason there's an emergency and one exit out of that parking area has been blocked. So we're relatively challenged. If there's any sort of bottleneck, it's right here. And so finding another potential emergency route out of the site is probably something we should be considering. This diagram just represents the required landscape area that needs to be taken into account relative to city code. It represents 15% of the site needs to be left open for landscape. Not really a problem on this upper parcel, given how much forest land we have. The lower parcel, again, you have a large area of trees that are located here that would accommodate that just fine. Lastly, these are the setbacks that are required by local zoning code. Again, we have so much site area relative to this parcel, and even in this one, that it's not a huge driver for the design or a huge concern. So lastly, we had our community engagement meeting. And so we had a reasonable turnout. And what we did at that presentation was that we had done our own research relative to Lincoln City and had given a presentation on that. We also gave a presentation about the functions of a police station and the types of design steps that you take to make it both functional, efficient, and it's also welcoming. And then we broke that out into a series of workstations around the room, which enabled people to give us feedback on what it is about Lincoln City that's important to them, what is it about this building that is important to them, and then an opportunity for them to ask us, as well as the chief, about questions about the site or specifically about how the police station works. So the first exercise, we had several boards up that gave had a series of images, both specific to Lincoln City, but also more generic about conceptual topics. And we let people pin up different colored sticky notes relative to things that they felt were positive or positively represented their community, or negatively said, this has nothing to do with us as a community. And so of all these images, these were the images that actually got sticky notes. So if we break that down just to focus on these were the images that received positive sticky notes. And within that exercise, we asked people to write down things that connected them to their community and actual write comments. So natural materials and celebrate our wood heritage, embrace the weather, which is always an appropriate topic, integrate with climate and features in the building. It would be nice to have more tribal history and influence. We'll also request for good quality in art, that those types of things are representative of the community. Spaces for officers to relax, foster supportive relationships. I think those are more about the building themselves, but fundamentally that the community is family friendly. Several people listed this image as, or one particular person said, this is Lincoln City, this image right here. These were the negative images, or the images that people felt didn't represent Lincoln City. This feels more like Newport. I like the idea of totems, but these aren't necessarily reflective of local culture. These ideas about walling off the coast. And this isn't really us, but we need something for kids to do. Next workstation is we asked people what specifically this facility needed to, how could it represent them as a community. And these are the words that were tacked onto that board that people either wrote or grabbed out of a stack. And these were the images that were tacked on the board, again, to represent how they felt the facility should represent them. The bolded words here came more often, but all of these words were listed. This last comment was making sure that the facility felt down to earth, but also formal, and sort of had a balance in between. The things that we gravitated towards mostly is the welcoming, natural, and an aspect of community. And then we asked, how should my police station support me as a community member? Again, all these words were listed, but the ones that stuck out were dependable, community, and helpful. So all that's great, but at a certain level we have to synthesize that and come to a more focused approach to what do we as designers take away and how do we leverage it moving forward. So these were the words that we took away from that exercise, the things that we're looking for to incorporate into the building. Is a welcoming nature, something that's secure, is community-focused, is representative of nature, is resilient, and has an aspect of art. These were the images that seemed to gather the most attention from people. So the aspect of art and a notion about how some of that may be representative of tribal cultures that were here past. This is the image that people gravitated towards most in terms of representing the community as a connection to the beach and imagining a certain connection to family and the reason why people come here. The notion of the environment here. In our own research of digging into the geology and the history and everything else, the one thing that we took away is, of all the communities on the coast that I have any familiarity with, this is the one that has always brought people to the beach, to connect to the beach. Your very first recorded representation of white settlers coming to this area were on a honeymoon. And that's about as fundamental as you can get for a community that caters, has a strong community connection to tourism. So the next question in that then is, what brings people here? And why have people been coming here for so long? So really, it's this environmental connection to the natural environment of the coast as well as just being at the beach. There's something really amazing about that. So what does that mean for architects, and what do we do with that information? So when we focus on a facility that's welcome, secure, and connects to the community, this is the fundamental challenge of a police station, is that their job is to serve the community and be open, accessible, and helpful. But the things that they do inherently require security. So how do we balance that? So we showed this during our interview. This is a project that was done by our partner architect out of Phoenix. This is the Salt Lake City's police and fire building. That's all glass, which is not typical of a public safety center in any way, shape, or form. But it's a very, very secure facility. It has ballistic glazing and things like that, and it's positioned in such a way that you can see, it sounds heavy, but you can see if a threat is coming. And so we look for creative ways to incorporate security that makes sure that it doesn't feel like it's a bunker. Additionally, the notion of having things being open and welcome, it's that people need to be able to see in. This is a public facility, and it needs to be open and welcoming. The ability to see inside allows a certain sense of transparency, both physically and philosophically, about how a police station runs. And lastly, that the spaces inside are warm and inviting, particularly the public spaces, not so much the holding cells, but specifically the public spaces don't scare people away. So next is the notion of nature. And we look at nature from a couple different ways. One is how a building sets in a landscape. And you have one of the best examples architecturally on the coast. Salishan, designed by John Storrs in the late 60s. That's a prime example of how you nestle a piece of architecture into a really fabulous landscape. How you position things to connect both inside and outside to either connect to that landscape or shape space. We also look about when you're inside the building, how can you have direct connection outside to nature and daylight. These things have huge impacts on productivity for people inside the office and inside the facility, as well as what it means to be able to see in. Obviously, we still have to be secure when we do that. And then other ways of bringing nature inside the volume, inside the building itself. So these are all strategies that we'll take a look at and employ. When it comes to resiliency, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. At the coast and throughout Oregon, it means how do you deal with the earthquake? Fundamentally, that's how we approach our structural design. That's key to it, but also how do we make sure that those structural elements that are key to keeping the building survivable in an earthquake, that they are incorporated into design in a compelling way so they're not an afterthought. Next, resiliency is also about how you manage the resources at the building, how you leverage water, how you leverage food, those types of things in the event of an emergency. The most sustainable buildings are inherently the most resilient. And so keeping that sustainability aspect in mind as we're designing the facility, outside of just being one of the goals that we've talked about, it also lends itself to helping the building be more resilient. Lastly, resiliency is about flexibility inherently. This building should last several generations, or at least more than one. And so what happens relative to that is making sure that you have enough flexibility to change the building over time to meet needs, new policing, new technology, things that we've talked about relative to the project goals. This image is actually of what's called demountable partitions, walls that are not made of studs and chip, but can actually be reconfigured, reworked. The sophistication of these types of systems has grown dramatically over the years so that they don't feel like they're cubicle walls, they feel like architecture. Lastly is the incorporation of art. We've talked about that as project goals with you as well. Obviously the community has impact relative to that as well. There's different ways to incorporate art into architecture. There's using the architecture to frame a specific piece. This is an example in British Columbia, I believe. There's also examples of projects in McMinnville and other places where there's a dedicated art piece that the architecture has been built around. There's also the notion of finding aspects of the architecture that can actually have it incorporated in. This is a skylight that was done by James Carpenter, a well-known artist, whether it's through glass or the carving of doors, which happens up at Salashan and other places. There are ways to actually make it part of the architecture, not secondary, not necessarily something that you hang on the wall. Lastly, finding appropriate inspiration to draw the artistic inspiration from, whether it's through from the tribal connection or other aspects. We want to make sure that it represents the community, but it also represents the officers who are working inside the facility. And with that, we'll open up to questions. I will say that this is the research phase. This is all the information that we're gathering. From this point further, onward is we get to start drawing now, which is, for us, it's the most exciting part.
Questions?
Yes, I was just wondering if maybe we could back up a step. These are absolutely fabulous ideas, and you've done a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. Really things to think about. But as far as site, are we married to the site? It seemed to have changed, or are we in the prenup stages of negotiation? Is this the site we've chosen? Have we looked at maybe another site? I'm concerned because our building has now grown from 22,000, possibly 24,000 feet to 27,000 feet, and we're currently in an 8,000 square foot building. And how much excavation are we going to need to this property? Those are just some of the questions I have.
Sure. Our directive is that this is the site that we're working with. We talked early on about exploring other sites. That wasn't something that we elected to do. As a team, partnered with the chief and with the city manager, this is a site that we are working towards. Relative to, is it the right site? Every site can be molded to fit as best we can. I think the real challenge of this site is that trying to maintain the existing building site while we're doing construction, that's probably the hardest part. It's not impossible, and we'll find ways to do it. There will be some sort of excavation or positioning of the building to be out over top of the grade, which is what the current building does now. To what degree, I don't know yet. We'll be taking all of that into consideration as we're laying things out. I answered all your questions?
You done, Councilor Casper?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor.
I've got a bunch of things. So our access roads, are they going to be on a slope?
You say the access roads coming out of the site?
You said there had to be two exits. Are they going to be on a slope, or are you going to have to cut away from the ground to put them on a slope?
Depending on how we decide to exit the site, yes.
Okay, so you have an earthquake. Those things that are on a slope are going to want to follow gravity because it's pretty irresistible. So you lose your ingress and egress. What do you do about that?
I think you plan for as many exits out of the area as you can. You also structure the driveways to support what you know of the earthquake or the potential earthquake at the time. No solution is ever perfect.
Well, it's a perfect solution if you build your roads on a flat slope, not on a slope, but on level ground, because they're not going to fall over.
Well, I think it depends on the stability and things of the soil around it. But all that's to be investigated still.
I think I'd like to add in that, as we talked about, the design of the facility to be resilient and to, support the emergency services function, that does need to extend out into the overall design solution. It's not too helpful if you have a highly resilient facility, but no way to, bring the services out to the people who need them. So, because we haven't actually put pen to paper or fingers to computer buttons yet, we don't know what those routes might be. We know what routes are available outside the site. So I think it's part of the overall consideration we need to look at to be able to really answer your question at the level of specific that you're asking us.
I would think you'd want those answers before you go too far forward, right?
Sure. It's part of the design. It's part of the schematic design process that we're going to be getting into.
Okay, so in the last 40 years, our town's grown 5,000 people. In fact, less than 5,000 people. Currently, we are operating out of a 7,900 square foot or something like that location. This is 4 times that size. My hotel is 16,000 square feet. You're twice the size of that. What in the world is going to happen in the next few years to make us want to spend that much money on a facility that seems to me to be hugely overbuilt? And what concerns me also, and not to be so negative, I'm not trying to be, is we try to emphasize nature, yet you're going to go in there with bulldozers and chainsaw and take a good piece of it, which in this world climate I don't think is a really good thing to do. I think we need to be respectful of the environment and leave as many trees up as we possibly can. I got one more maybe. Oh, yeah. I love design. I mean, I'm a design person. And but this isn't going to be on Highway 101 as a tourist attraction. Most of us never go to the police station. Some of us do, but nobody here, I don't think. And so why do we invest all this resources, try to make something so attractive for a town that the vast majority of them are never going to see it or be there? The only people that you're going to delight are prisoners. So I just, quite frankly, I just think we're biting off more, not maybe more than we can chew, but the opportunity cost of spending all this money over a facility that's so vastly overbuilt, I just think is a mistake. So
I have a couple of responses that I can answer to.
Okay.
Relative to the size of the facility, as I mentioned, I think that we've got some reviewing to do to make sure it's right-sized. Generally when you start in a programming effort, it's, here's my opportunity, I'm going to ask for everything I can get. And what we do relative to that is that gets combined or clashes against budget. And so we try to right-size both for the needs of the community, but also for the budget realities. So relative to the overall size, this is a projection for 2040, is what we've targeted for the overall program needs. And so population growth projections, and I don't have them in front of me, so I apologize. I want to say peg it at between 10,500 and 11,000 of residents by 2040. That's based on Portland State's projection growth map. And please don't hold me to those numbers. It's what I'm trying to remember. Relative to comparing that against your current facility is woefully undersized. Your staff, your police staff is doing a lot with very little. All you have to do is, if you've ever had the opportunity to walk into the evidence storage area, you'll understand what I mean. Compare that to similar facilities in comparable communities, it's night and day. So it's, again, we have work to do to right-size the facility still, but the initial assessment that it was somewhere between 22 and 25 or 24, that's not far off the mark. Your last question about, trying to make sure I get all the
Trees.
We're committed to being as sensitive as we can to nestling the building in. That's why we sort of brought that up relative to nature. I can't say that we're going to protect every tree on site. I don't think that's possible given the need to bend around the existing building. But we're not going to be bulldozing the whole area, per se. We'll do what we can.
Well, on 2040, I don't see how you can possibly know what the demands are going to be in 2040.
We can't.
And, you know, my recommendation, for what it's worth, is 1 of 7. The answer to uncertainty is flexibility.
Absolutely.
And if you build, say, a 10,000 or 12,000 square foot facility, and make it able to be added on in the future if that's what you need, that seems to me to be far more prudent than overbuilding it by 2/3. And as that sits, the new area sits unused, it still suffers from, you know, decay and decline that you need to approach again. And I guess that's about it. Those are my concerns. But it also, by the way, it comes from the same fund, I think, that maintains City Hall, which does sit on Highway 101, and that is in desperate need of a facelift. So when I talk about opportunity costs, where you're going to have a Taj Mahal, a palace back buried in the woods, and for Lincoln City, our City Hall is going to be on our eyesore list. So, yeah, now I'm done. Thank you.
Are you finished?
Yeah,
My question is about earthquake preparedness, and could you go back to that slide that shows the how you would build for that? There was one.
The blue line.
There was one, back one maybe? Oh, wait, no, forward, that one, up on the right?
Yep.
Okay, that looks to me pretty typical. And so my question is, again, okay, to what earthquake is that? And we're expecting the 9.2. And I have heard from very little research I've done that, for example, in Japan, they use rollers, they use springs, they use other things on their most particularly important buildings. And aside from being on 101 or not, I want this building to withstand that earthquake, because that is where all of our coordination will happen for helping people and all that. So I'm not sure that that's it. So can you make me feel better about that?
Sure. This wasn't representative of the actual solution.
Okay.
Generally, when you're designing for seismic issues, earthquake issues, there's a lot of different strategies that come into play relative to the structural system. And so it's balancing the effectiveness of those against the cost and then the overall design. But what we've discussed in relative internally as a team, is also with our structural engineers, is what's the different metrics that help us determine what's appropriate. So the Oregon Building Code will say an essential facility, which is what this building is, has to meet 50% more seismic load than anybody else, which that's a pretty basic assessment of just go make it do that kind of thing. And the code also tells us the zone that we're in sort of defines the threat. So we're in the same zone as San Francisco. So they don't look at it as a specific Richter scale value per se, but they look at it as the amount of forces applied to a building that might be generated by a 9.2 or something of that magnitude. And the likelihood of it's going to happen, as well as the specifics of the frequency of the tremor and all those types of things. Much more sophisticated than I'm qualified to answer. But, so we look at those types of things. So that's one way of evaluating the metric. What we've talked about is going a step further in terms of the level of detail or the metric that we use. So the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, they have their own metrics for facilities. And it's life safety, immediate occupancy, and operational. And so I've done some work for 12th Valley Fire and Rescue. When they do a new facility or when they update one of their older ones, they do operational, which means nothing moved in the building for the most part. The lights still work, the mechanical system still works. We can get the bay doors open to get the fire engines out. That's likely where we're going to aim our metric. The other ones are immediate occupancy, means that we can get back into the building, but the lights may not work and the electrical system is sort of wonky, but the building's okay, we can get in there and use it. Life safety is we got out and there's no going back in. So we're aiming for probably the more stringent level of that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple other questions. One is I just wanted to comment on the lower left idea of being modular, being able to move, but also being architecturally done rather than like the cube idea. I like that. And also, as far as the overall size goes, I'm not so worried about that, but I do wonder about how much space, if you've thought about it, for that community room, because I think I heard the chief say that he'd like to be able to use that for a variety of reasons, and maybe that's some of the the same or different uses in the same space. Maybe we can do some of that kind of thing in order to reduce the size, because that seemed a little bit big to the size, but you know, your example of the evidence room is such a good one. That thing is jam-packed. I don't know how that woman works in that little tiny space and maintains it. It's a disaster waiting to happen. But anyway, I do appreciate all your attention to what you've heard at the community meetings and that you've been able to pull those ideas together. Thank you for that. Thank you. Oh, wait, one more. Oh, one more. All right, one more, sorry. And I just almost forgot. I saw your name of your firm attached to a building in Beaverton, and could you tell us a little bit about that, if there's anything that has anything to do with what we are planning?
Are you referring to the Beaverton's Public Safety Center?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Beaverton's new police and emergency management facility. So they're currently located in the Griffith Building, which is the old City Hall. We're helping them move to a new site, which is on the corner of Southwest Allen and Southwest Hall. So we're partnered with the same architect out of Phoenix to do their new facility.
Jonathan?
Sure.
Thank you.
And if I could get you gentlemen to kind of keep those a little close there. Thanks.
You know, I don't know what percentage this location is. Is it 100% this has to be built in this location or not? You know, because you gave 3 reasons why it would be difficult. Would be the roads. You have the one in and out that's right there on 9th and I forget the other street. I don't know, the police road. And then the proximity to that tsunami zone, you know, it's within 20, 30 feet, you know, it's right there. And then working while the building. So, you know, I know we have other land, and so I just don't know if this is the place that we have to build it or not. So, you know, I don't know and haven't seen, you know, this is 100% or anything like that. So I would like to know if there's other places, I know because if you're going to have to build roads, if you're going to have the difficulty with working while operating, if you're going to have the difficulty with tsunami and the difficulty with all that, could we use that as a way to say, okay, well, here's other property, and yes, we would have to build a road there also, but that would open up, like by the baseball fields, I know we have property over there, and that's high up, and, and it's, off the highway and stuff like that. So I know that, we do have other property. Is there any concern with green energy or solar or wind energy or anything like that? And for future, if we're looking to 2040, what electric vehicle components do you have planned, or more electronic-based vehicles or things like that? Moving away from petroleum. And it would have been nice if we had that packet too, to go through it, because I don't know, is the dotted orange line, you cannot build past that point, in that one picture.
No.
So, it's all nice, but it, was not that clear for me. And does storage have to be in the same location as the building itself? I hear, and that could be a side question now for our own, until this is completed, does storage have to be in our current building, and does it have to be in our future building? How often or how readily accessible does that have to be within the police department? Chief Killian, I don't know, but I'm just, as a way to manage, okay, so if she's overwhelmed, we have another floor up here, could it be secured and could it be used and things like that, and in the future, does it have to be in the same place as well? So.
Okay, so let me unpack a few of those things there. The site location is, it's kind of the parameters that we were given. That's what we as a design team, that's what we were instructed to take. So our evaluation was based on, this is what we've got to work with, so that's what we move forward with. You own the entire parcel, and I know there are other plans relative to the rest of that site that are beginning to be in the works. So relative to other ways out and things like that, maybe it dovetails into the potential city park that might go there.
Up a 3rd Street.
Up the 3rd.
Right.
So we did talk about just, as architects, we're always throwing out ideas left and right. That's what we do. But we did talk about the potential of the police station being off of 3rd versus being down the other end.
But it's all swampy.
It's all swampy, and the tsunami zone creeps up a little higher up the grade right there, as well as that 3rd goes one way at one point as you go into 101. So things like that, we definitely considered the capacity for the entire site that is sort of within our realm of influence. Relative to sustainability and green uses and things like that, we do everything we can to put the infrastructure in place, but don't put everything in because we need to make sure we're watching your dollars. So it's right-sizing the planning for the future to make sure that you don't do anything that makes you have to back up when you try to put that kind of stuff in, but you're at least thinking about it and doing what you can.
I'd like to add in on long-term planning and right-sizing, as well as possibly looking at future expansion. Something that we always try to do when we're at this stage, at the very beginning of the planning and design, is to locate these facilities so that a new wing or horizontal expansion could happen in the future, because this could be the site for the police for a long, long time. And so we always take that into consideration, even though it may not be implicit in our work assignment or work plan at the beginning. It's just good planning policy.
Right.
Sorry, there were a lot of questions there. Oh, storage. Storage overall is something that's always a struggle in any building, especially in a police building. Outside of the evidence concerns, which I'll talk about in a minute, there's also the aspects of, I've got 500 traffic cones I have to store, or flares and things like that. You try to locate the storage where it's most convenient for the officers or for people's day-to-day. They are coming in and out every day, whether they're bringing a suspect in or just checking back in or writing a report, something like that. The evidence specifically needs to be right there where they're working, both from a efficiency standpoint, but also a chain of custody standpoint. That's about as you want that as close as you can. There are agencies that have it split. Beaverton right now has theirs off in another facility. and they're doing everything possible to get it back located with them. So that's part of the program for that facility moving forward. So the one thing that our partner architect out of Phoenix always pushes is that, well, if you can find site space, put the traffic cone storage and stuff like that in basically the architectural equivalent of a tough shed out back. We don't have to spend the money on that to make it seismically safe. If it falls down in an earthquake, traffic cones will be
We've
fine.
lost some traffic cones.
So the challenge is that we're a little more constrained on this site, but it's something that we'll be thinking about. Is there any other questions that I missed?
No, I don't think so. Okay. Towards this end?
I'd like to know what happened to the feasibility of the property directly across from the fire station. That's what we talked about initially.
Right. That's still there. Still there, and it's still, we're looking at the whole thing. So we're looking at that wedge-shaped piece, all of this, we're looking at all of the property that the city currently owns as potential for some element or elements to accommodate the overall program, whether it's site or storage or main police building facility.
I would say, go ahead.
At this point, you feel that the two-story main building is better there than,
No.
no?
Sorry, what I would say relative to that is, this is just a diagram to show the amount, the block of space that we have to accommodate. It's not that the building will sit at that location.
Okay.
It's just a sense to give you, it's just there to give you a sense of scale, so you understand what has to fit on those parcels.
And it seems to me, looking there, that it would fit on that other spot. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the one thing that we want to be careful about, and it's the kind of security things you think about in designing this type of facility, is that the city does not control these buildings here.
Right.
And so if somebody wanted to do damage to the police station in some fashion, they could put something in one of those storage units that you don't have any control over. So
And up against the
There's a big
whatever the
site
hill-
drop-off
hill
there.
on the other side would be more secure.
Right,
I can-
in some
I can
ways,
see
yes.
that. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Anderson?
Again, thank you. This is very helpful, and I'm glad you're pursuing with the input, as you said you would. I could not find in my paperwork that chart where you showed the first time we would see an estimate of costs.
yes.
Or I wasn't listening, perhaps.
So our next step is to start putting pen to paper. Once we've done that, and we'll
And
come,
pen on paper is not design, it's the numbers? Okay.
it's designing the facility, so we need to have something to estimate. And so what we do is, from this stage forward, we start designing, we'll develop a couple of options. Those options will be vetted by the chief as well as with you to select a preferred one. Once we have that preferred one, then we'll develop enough information that a cost estimator can take a first pass. So,
Because a lot of the questions that I think we have and concerns that I've heard tie right back to this cost thing. Because, you know, I too had site questions. But I'm not worried about that yet until I see how much money you're going to spend for off-site improvements, so to speak, or off-building improvements. So, you know, I can't see the date on that, but I assume that's coming up real shortly where you'll have that. Excuse me. I'm hoping there's not a lot of pen-to-paper expense that's thrown away if, in fact, we don't, that the site now doesn't fit well, or we need to make, significant changes. Would that be true?
yeah, I think that the purpose of the exercise is to, if you go looking for a number too early, it's always going to be extremely high because you don't have enough information, right? So we have to put enough out there that someone can accurately figure things out. I will tell you that right now is a tough market to be in from a cost standpoint. Our, the range of construction costs could be anywhere from $415 a square foot to $500 a square foot. So that's what's the reality of the market that we're in.
So I'm going to, just so you know, I'm going to wait for that before I really come on. And I would expect that probably be a deep dive when those numbers. The other thing, just for information, because we may have forgotten, this land site was a donation, and it had deed restrictions on it as far as development.
Yes.
I get a little nervous when I hear we're jumping from, the square footage increase, and only because we looked at this site for 2 small residential lots, and that put us over the percentage, or so close that we chose to back off. Down, so up, well, the whole piece goes to
Right.
third.
Right.
So by, down on the west side, you can see that open space, and or maybe it's not that far down, but there were some lots, single-family lots that we looked at
Okay.
to make some housing, and chose to back away from that and keep it park, because we were so close to the percentages. I just think, as you start doing a footprint, we need to check back that we're not going over our percentage of development.
That's good feedback, and we'll go do that research. Make sure that we're not tripping over that.
Thank you.
Councilor Casper? Oh, okay. Just a couple of minor points here. Thank you very much for all you've done.
Sure.
Some great comments from council, good things to digest. Just a comment on the weather situation. I was remembering back when I received one of those little household weather instruments as a gift. Most of those can be tied to a site called Weather Underground, and you can get all the real local data from the non-professionals, but it's there on the website, so you can get a closer feed. Have the police personnel been polled? That's a lot of Ps. We've had the community ask, what kind of art do you want on the wall, and this, that, and the other thing. What have the people who are going to work in that building had to say?
From our interviews with them, that are mostly focused on the function of the building and their day-to-day, how they work.
When will we hear that?
Most of it's reflected in just the space list, but we can capture some of those comments and share those back with council.
I would appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. They range from, is it starting yet, to I was convinced this was never going to happen in my lifetime, but it is now, so I can retire in peace.
Well, I want to kind of try to figure out how important aesthetics are to them. Try to think of, the business side of me just says, white walls, linoleum, it's great, you're good. To recognizing that someone may have just come in off of a call where they had to pull a body out of a car.
Right.
And they got to come back to that building. And, what are we doing to take care of that, or to help in any way that you can with the building? I think I go along with Councilor Anderson, Councilor Ward a little bit in the idea of, when I walk into a police building, I really don't want to be there. I'm usually reporting something or missing something, and it's a conveyance of information back and forth.
Yes.
I'm more concerned about the person behind the counter. I could have a beautiful building if that person's a jerk. What good's it, all that artwork? And then the other side, I want to say, and I've brought this up before about glass and things like that. For me, it's got to be clean, functional, and cleanable. I've used to work years ago in the federal buildings downtown, teaching janitorial skills to handicapped adults. Brass and wood are not your friends when you're trying to take care of a facility in marble. And so those things I just want to make sure we're staying cognizant of, that someone's going to clean it. It's going to be an expense to us, and how far do we want to go, down that road just to make it look pretty for someone who's going to be in there 10 minutes. That's all. And then, I don't know how keen I am on the community room side of it. We have plenty of community rooms in this town. How much more do we need right at a police station? So that's my comments for that. But I'm waiting for the next step.
To see something.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd just like to comment on one of the things that we have found in designing facilities like this is that it is the aesthetic of the space, but I'm thinking about the workspace. A big part of our program is the area of where the police are going to be working day to day to day. And being able to provide a good work environment for them with good natural light and reasonable space and a great ability to work with their coworkers is important, and it increases their ability to do their jobs well. And so I think rather than characterize it as, you know, a really nice aesthetic with beautiful finishes, it's a little more like what is the quality of the space and the quality of the light and the quality of the area that these folks are going to be coming in and out of every day. That is a primary concern of ours. And then the other concern on the public side, if we do have a community room, there is a certain feeling for coming to the facility and have it being welcoming and warm and, you know, a place where people are going to do some kind of community activity. Obviously, if the community room went away for some reason, that would change the feeling of that building as a community resource, as a civic building.
I think your comments about the times people are coming to the building are important ones, because the public, unless they're coming to meet with the chief for an administrative function, the public who are coming here on a really bad day. And creating spaces that are calming and warm and inviting are sort of key to helping someone through that experience. Obviously, the people coming through the back door don't get the same experience. They get one entirely different. But that last goal in our list of things of creating a facility that attracts the best and the brightest, I agree with Troy. It's not about making it
Fancy.
super fancy. It's about making it feel right and feel professional. It also is about making it incredibly durable, because police love their facilities to death, no matter where you are. And this is a building that's never really going to close. It's open 24/7, at least with dispatch. So it has to have enough integrity and strength to it that it's still going to look good 20 years from now.
Or 30 or 40.
60. And so, Ron, when the people who occupy this building get an idea of what's going to be put into that, how much grief are you going to get for what they have to work in here?
Well, this building's been called the dinosaur, so we'll get a little bit, I'm sure.
And massive transfer requests, and everyone wants to get a dispatch.
I do have a couple questions myself, Mr.
Sure, please.
One is more of a comment, and that is just to dovetail on what Councilor Anderson mentioned. The sooner in the process that the City Council can establish the budget, the quicker all of the answers to the questions we've had will be able to be answered. Because everything I've heard so far is dependent upon what the final budget of the building is going to be. So if that can move up in the process, many of the questions that we've heard tonight would be answered. The second thing is that I heard you mention 2 or 3 times about the difficulty working around the existing building. I don't know if we have considered that if that building is actually the best site for a new location, soil-wise and everything else, what would it take for us to transfer the police to a new site and then tear down that building and put the new one there? And so I think that's something that should be considered if it turns out that the best site on that property is where the existing building is.
Sure. If I could respond to those. The first comment about the pricing. So what we can do to get earlier broad brush numbers is do comparable facilities, look at what they cost to build, get them adjusted for escalation where we currently are in the market, and apply that just square footage to the square footage that we have. That would give you at least a range to work with. The sooner that council can set a budget, the sooner that we can sharpen our pencils and say, if that's our target, that's what we have to hit. So I think that's an exercise that we can go through relatively quickly.
Just joining in with that, and one of the reasons why that is important is that beginning tomorrow and over the next few weeks, we will be discussing all of our capital projects with the City Council, and this will be as part of that context of that discussion. So
I think we could do that relatively rapidly. Relative to moving the existing facility, we've talked a lot about that. because that seemed like an obvious one for us. The challenge is in the fact that you have your 911 call center there. And so relocating that isn't necessarily an easy thing to do. Some of the ideas that came out either from us or from the chief or from others is that if you needed another backup 911 facility anyway as part of your resiliency plan, if you built that someplace off-site, had it, the infrastructure set up and ready to go, you could move your current 911 folks over, tear the facility down, and obviously you still have to find a home for the officers and things like that. One of the things that came up, a recommendation from our partner, was that if you can find an old grocery store, those make great temporary police facilities. Just the functionality of them, that's all on one floor level. You can, repurpose the parking lot, and it's a really easy thing to do.
We've got a big empty building at the north end of town there.
I think we saw that one. So it's definitely something to consider. If to use this site, the one sort of flat spot that we've got to work with is where the existing building is now. So it's something to consider.
Mr. Mayor? Oh.
You mentioned that the dispatch is 24 hours, but so is patrol.
Yes.
But Mr. Anderson? Mr. Anderson?
I apologize for not including this before, but I just remember that, and I'm sure you're aware, so it's a way of checking that now in 2018, henceforth, public buildings need to have 1.5% towards green of their costs. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming this is already built into your design, or would be.
It will be, yes.
Okay. The other is, I guess I need to take a stand of reminding council, regardless of their comments, about, take another look at how this building looks. This is right in, and will be not on 101, but certainly right across the street from a large collector of out of the area residents and local residents called a shopping mall. Plus, I'm just amazed at the population that runs through the post office there. And to the point where I've been thinking that, if we're ever going to have a city plaza, right in there would be a great spot, out of the wind, again, using public buildings, police, fire, post office. So I would not relax, if I were the dictator, I would not have you relax your cosmetics and appeal and functionality.
Thank you.
Thank you
When
very
will we
much.
see each other
Appreciate
again?
all of your comments.
When will we see each other?
I think. Let me go back up. We're looking at the 12th of March to come back for your next council meeting.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. That's only about an hour and a half. Okay. Public hearings, public comments. Nothing. Ordinances, nothing. Resolutions, nothing. Special order of business, contract approval for owner's representative services, construction contract award Northeast 22nd, workforce housing, and bid award. Contract approval for owner's representative services, Lincoln City Police Facility Project. What are we looking to? And Chief, you have a...
I do.
Placard there. Great, thanks.
Excuse me, I'll catch up on my notes here. So, good evening, Mayor, City Council. Before you is a proposal to authorize the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with the Klosh Group to perform owner's representative services for the city of Lincoln City on the police facility project in the amount not to exceed $168,034 with a 10% contingency, or a total of $184,837.40. As you recall, back on November 13th, I reported back to the City Council as far as the selection process, and the Klosh Group was the firm that staff or myself recommended to perform these duties for the city. City Council on that date authorized city staff to negotiate the professional services agreement for the owner's representative services with the Klosh Group for the police facility project. And this is the scope of work that they came back with. The scope of work has been reviewed by myself, the city manager, and the city attorney. This scope of work would be dovetailed into the standard city professional services agreement. And so at this point, I'm asking council to make a motion to authorize the city manager to execute this negotiated contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
I move to authorize the city manager to execute the negotiated professional services agreement between the City of Lincoln City and the Klosh Group for owner's representative service for the police facility project in the amount not to exceed $168,034 to include a 10% contingency.
Second. Motion is second. Discussion?
I have something. As this contract will be to represent the city, I'm a little bit, I don't know what the word is, disappointed, I guess, that someone from that organization or that firm is not here, so we don't have the opportunity to meet with them or talk with them, and yet they're going to represent the city and following through on the work of overseeing the police station. So I just want to say that.
That was probably at my beckon rather than their. They asked if they needed to be here, and I didn't think that was that need existed.
I would like
as opposed to like different professional services agreements or construction contracts are awarded. Generally, I didn't find those contractors being present, so I took that same analogy to this particular service agreement.
I can follow that thinking, but this is a different type of position. This is somebody who's going to be
that would be reflective of me and not of the Klosh Group. They did ask if they needed to be here, and I didn't see the need, so that's on me, not them.
Okay. Well, I have another question, too, is within the task list, there's something that's called FF&E. Do you know what that means?
Furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
Okay.
Is that it?
I think so.
Any further discussion? Please.
I would echo Councilor Hinton's concerns. If this person is going to represent us, I would sure like to see who's representing us or this company. I did have some questions. How does the project manager differ from a general contractor?
So the owner's representative?
Yeah, well, it seems to me we've got the owner's representative, and we've got general contractors and project managers and a general contractor. I'm not sure what all of those guys are. So you've got did you follow that?
Where are you looking at specifically so I can follow along with you?
Oh, I don't have I just have my question sheet that I came up with. Okay. So I can't direct you. I think it would be on the first sheet, if my recollection is.
Ron, is that anything you can weigh in on?
I think so. I'm looking at the tasks that are outlined in your staff report, and it talks about the general contractor. Under team procurement, it talks about the general contractor RFP development and review, and the general contractor solicitation and contracting. So under this type of construction, you have three parties that are all participating: the architect, the owner's representative who will work with us in developing the request for proposals to hire the contractor and subcontractor. And then finally, you have the contractors and subcontractors that would be hired. Under a traditional construction type, the architects would design a building. We would put it out for bid. One person would bid it, or one company would bid it, and then they take it from there. In this case, and in my experience with the past, the owner's rep and the contractor will work to do the sub-bidding together, and there will be multiple bids that are associated with it. And so the owner's rep primary responsibility is representing us in making sure that we prepare the documents correctly to get for the bidding, and then overseeing the project to make sure that everything is done according to the plans of the architect.
Okay, so what does the project manager do? Because it listed a project manager in the report.
I believe that is since we are hiring a company, that is the person who would be directly responsible for anything that their company is doing in the work.
Okay, so that's the head of it then?
Correct.
The owner's rep?
I'm sorry, yeah, the project manager would be the person from the firm that would be working specifically on this project.
Okay, and that person that might be our owner's rep, or is that?
Yes, it's one in, yes.
Okay, and then the last one, this is I couldn't find it anywhere. If you look under the category of scope of services, on the report, I think that's page 1 or 2, I can't remember. On the title of the page, just from my memory, it should say scope of services, and there's a list of itemized things that we're being billed for.
Right.
You see that?
It says general administration, team procurement, programming, and then it has things under each of those.
Yeah, what do the W's stand for? I couldn't figure out what all those little W's were. Do you see them?
Oh, I believe that's duration of time, 4 weeks.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. That was it.
Okay.
No one else? That's okay.
I just had a clarification question for my own education. On scope of service, it talks provide oversight and direction, local economic outreach program, sub-trade bidding plan. Is that like subcontracting?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so smart. Okay. And then the second
I'm
one.
learning too, so.
Wow, I can build my doghouse now. The other one is just a little bit farther down, oversee, review, CM, blah, blah, deliverables, including guaranteed maximum price submittal. Is there a maximum? Is there a minimum?
Well, there's no minimum, so when we develop the budget, whatever that budgetary number is, that's the maximum number. So whatever the contractor and the architects come up with, we make sure that it's a guarantee that they meet that maximum. That's the maximum price.
Okay.
And they guarantee it. So if they guarantee X number of dollars and there's no change orders or anything to affect that guaranteed price, that's what they're guaranteeing that the price is going to be.
Okay, so that'll be non-negotiable, that'll be it?
Again, that differs from a
Theoretically?
traditional way in which we would submit something out without a price, and we would just take whatever the low bid that comes in it. In this case, you have already negotiated the maximum price, and it's firm.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Henderson.
If I can. Chief, I don't know if it's kosher, so the question is, with this owner's representative, do we run that, and have we run that by our architectural team, where they've worked with this group before? Is there going to be any friction with those? Because I look at both those as somebody on our big team. And so, one, has our architectural team worked with this Koch group?
I believe our
Come
current,
on forward, you can answer the question.
I believe they may have worked with them before they formed this team, one of the principals and stuff.
Yeah, that's correct. The Klosh Group has been around for a while. I believe, Troy, did you have a former project you may have worked with? The firm has. The individuals who are actually involved on this project are new to the Klosh Group, and they come from the contracting firm of Skanska. And so we've worked with Skanska for years, and I've worked with David Dwyer, or I've had communications with David Dwyer, not particularly on a project, but have known him for a while, and we won't have any problems working with him.
Because that's always the question, would you hire him back? You know, yeah, he left your firm, but would you hire him? Skanska, I think, is also involved in the hospital.
I think that's correct,
So
yes.
there's relationship there, too.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if that's appropriate, but I'm glad to know that, because I assume that has to be a good working relationship.
Yes, it is very important, and we can work with anybody. There's never a problem with that, but it's helpful when there's a everyone gets along.
Good. Okay. My other question, Chief, is what was changed in the RFP that went from one bidder to 5 bidders?
I believe the change was that we relaxed the restriction on specific police facility projects that they have done in the past and redrafted that to public facility. I still wanted them to show an experience in public building, and it appeared that specifying police stations and stuff was just too restrictive.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to clarify. We have the Klosh group in front of us now, but you had 5 proposals as a result of the request for proposals, and you have done that interviewing, correct, Chief Killian?
Yes.
Yeah. And was it just you, or was it a team?
No, it was a team. I believe involved in the interviews was myself, Stephanie Reed, and city manager interviewed.
So there has been the interview process.
There's yes, interviews and scores and that type of thing.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Hoagland.
To go in with that, so the interview team, were you guys unanimous? And were there any concerns during the interview process, with that?
It was a consensus of the group that Klosh or another person would serve us well. Stephanie and I went over the interviews again, and we felt service was best served with the Klosh group.
Purely not, so, with other things that we get, we have prices comparing the other ones or what was their previous work, and here we're just given one. So there wasn't, what's better of this or what's better of that, or the price range between this company and that company. So, in other cases, we've seen it, now we don't.
Right.
So
the bidding for this particular, the bid process that we used was request for proposals based on qualifications. So the price was kind of pushed off to the side because we wanted to make our selection based upon the qualifying aspects of this group.
Sure.
This particular group showed experience in public buildings, which was one of the requirements. They're also involved in the remodel for the Seaside Convention Center. So they've also showed more experience than others on the coastal climate. And that was probably the element that really pushed them over the edge.
Wonderful. The other thing is that we have a price on a building that hasn't even been designed. So if it's a different location, or if it's a different size, or if it's a different anything, is that, we say that it's not going to exceed 10% of the $168,000. But if it's less than that, or if it's a building that's not like that, or if it's a different location, I mean, what's going to happen in those circumstances?
For the owner's representative, location really isn't relevant.
Sure.
To the services that they're going to be providing. They're going to be providing, assisting us in getting the construction manager, general contractor, and then looking out for our interests in this whole process.
Sure.
So it doesn't really matter where it's being built at, or relative cost is insignificant too.
Even if the size of the building changes drastically from $27,000 to $15,000, we're still going to be charged the same amount of money.
Well, that drastic of a reduction would probably take less time and materials, and their quote is not to exceed, but
Is it to?
but it's
On the
based
other
upon
side,
time
too.
and based on time and materials. So if it takes them less time to do their work for a 16,000 square foot building, we're not going to be billed as we were for a
So that's part of that agreement.
27,000. Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Casper,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Hoagland.
Yes.
And Hinton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you. Construction contract award, Northeast 22nd Street from Northeast Surf to West Devils Lake Road.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we have a construction contract award for Northeast 22nd Street from Surf Avenue to West Devils Lake Road, and that's east of Ocean Lake School. And so we did that large intersection improvement at Northeast Surf and 22nd Street, and then this carries us from that project down to West Devils Lake Road. And that section of road has been deteriorating. And so the project includes edge grinding and overlay with 1.5 inches of asphalt and some spot repairs on Northeast 22nd from Surf to West Devils Lake Road. And we advertised the project for bid on October 25th. And on the November 16th, we opened 3 bids, and the lowest bidder was Road and Driveway for $54,421.83. The second bid was North Santiam Paving, $72,999.20. And Granite Construction Company at $103,103. So the lowest responsive and responsible bidder was Road and Driveway Company in the amount of $54,421. And we have this budgeted in our street capital fund. So, and the total budget was $160,000 for this project. And then I have a few other notes on our advertising, but our staff recommendation is recommends the construction contract be awarded to Road and Driveway Company in the amount of the $54,421.83 with a contingency of $5,442. So that's a 10% bid amount for a total of $59,863.83. Any questions on that?
So again, on this bid, it seems to me that we have just these drastic differences. We go from, on mobilization, 6,000 to 7,000 to 10,000. On traffic control, we go from 1,736, 7,000, and then one for 12,000. This is all for the same product. Demolition, one company $717, another company $300, and the other company $2,500. How do they, on valve adjustment, one was bidding 95, the other one 300, the other one 500. I mean, how are they coming up with their numbers? They have like this bingo thing that they
Well, Road and Driveway is our local paving company in Newport, and so generally their bids are lower. Their asphalt ton price is lower, and that's where, you know, a majority of the money is. They came in at $78 a ton versus $100 and $160 a ton. And so some of it can be travel. The other two companies are, you know, outside of our area. They're more toward the valley. So it costs them more trucking time and travel time. And, you know, on paving, it's one of those real variables. You know, I've seen bids all over the page on that. And so it's just whatever they want to spend on it, and Road and Driveway likes to get our projects, so they give us a really good bid. And so there's no rhyme or reason. You cannot figure it out because, you know, it's just their company and what they want to bid on it. And
it's like two people going to a restaurant. One gets billed $1 for his burger, the other one 32. I mean, what's the difference here?
And that's why we do the bidding process, so we can get that low bid.
And then my last question on it is, I really miss our city engineers, their estimate of what it should have been.
Well, 160 is what they had. That's what they had listed.
Is that what they came, did I just read that?
Yes. Yes.
So we did get our engineers in there. and they were-
Engineers' estimates there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not broken down on this particular sheet, but,
Well, could,
yeah,
is there
it's a
chance-
total.
I love those. If we could get our own engineers to put theirs down there.
Sure.
Like what we
Sure,
say and then.
and, you know, how we come up with those numbers is, we look at our experience and what those rates have been, and 78 a ton is a really good price.
I'm just looking for consistency when I look through there.
Yeah, and we consistently have the same numbers for our valve replacements and what we think.
I mean, the city goes consistent and reasonable, and then everybody else is bizarre.
Yeah.
So it's just,
Sometimes they may be higher. Yeah, paving's one of the most variable.
okay, thank you.
On that, I remember a discussion we had quite some time ago about paving material availability during winter, and only certain plants were providing it. Has that changed?
No, you can pave, we go by the ODOT standards, and so you can pave up to October 30th, and then I believe it's again March 15th, and so it's dependent on weather. So this project will be done depending on, the paving season and the temperatures. We want it to be, I think an average is 60 degrees out, and it has to be dry for a while, and they have to be able to do their prep work and grinding.
But it's not dependent upon production of the asphalt itself somewhere?
No,
We don't see a
no,
shortage
not
of that.
necessarily. I mean, they open the plants at a certain time, so you are dependent on when they open those plants.
Okay. Well, as long as
But we have a real specific time frame and weather conditions and temperature.
Any other questions? No?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the recommendation, motion to have the staff contract with a road and driveway company in the amount of $54,421,083 with a construction contingency of $5,442, which is a 10% contingency, for a total amount of $59,863.83.
Second it.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Ward,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Hoagland. Hinton.
Yes.
Casper.
Yes.
And Walke.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, Alda.
Thank you.
Workforce Housing Partnership, assignment of memorandum of understanding with Lincoln Community Land Trust, LCLT, Lincoln County, and the City of Newport. Commissioner Hall.
I'd like to have Diane Lynn, Executive Director of Proud Ground, join me.
Absolutely. And just for the viewing public who can't view tonight, if you'd just introduce yourselves again, please.
Yes, good evening. For the record, I'm Bill Hall, Lincoln County Commissioner and a resident of Newport, and served as Board President of Lincoln Community Land Trust since its inception in 2009.
And I'm Diane Lynn, Executive Director of Proud Ground. We've been managing partner here with Lincoln Community Land Trust for the last 3 years.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. And I think the council memorandum does a great job of outlining what the proposal is before you tonight. And I would, if possible, just like to hit 4 quick points, and then Diane has a few things to add, and then, of course, we'd be glad to address any of your questions. First, you may be wondering why we're doing this or proposing to do this. First and foremost is to leverage resources and expertise and to achieve economies of scale that we can't do if the Land Trust remains a separate entity. Second, a little bit more history, as talked about in the memo. Originally, Community Services Consortium provided contract staffing to the Land Trust. That was always under an understanding that that would be a limited duration agreement, that essentially CSC would serve as an incubator, but the fledgling would have to leave the nest at some point. When that time came, that was when the Land Trust Board approached your council, the Newport Council, and the County Commission to request the funding for what we originally envisioned as a full-time executive director, despite offering what we thought was a pretty competitive benefits package. We simply could not find somebody with the rather unique skill set that would have required. So Diane initially contacted me, and then we brought it before the board, and the agreement was signed 3 years ago for Proud Ground to provide the staffing services for us. So this is not a new relationship. It's something that we've been able to test drive now, going into the 4th year. So you may be wondering, if we do move in this direction, what happens to the local voice, local accountability, and local oversight, which I think would be a key question. First off, as of this year, I have been appointed as a member of the Board of Directors for Proud Ground. Also, as a land trust board, we're talking about, and I think this is still in discussion, but definitely setting up some kind of local oversight or advisory committee where each city would be invited to designate a representative on that board. So I think Proud Ground realizes for this to work, the local voice has to be very strong. Also, just one other point I'd like to add quickly. Last Monday night, the Newport City Council approved this revision on a 6-0 vote, and last Wednesday, Lincoln County Board of Commissioners approved it unanimously as well. Diane.
Thank you, and I just want to start by thanking you all for your public service. As a former elected official myself, I recognize how difficult these jobs can be, and excuse me, wonderful to be here with you tonight and join the champion of this effort for so many years, Commissioner Bill Hall, and the rest of the Board of Directors of the Lincoln Community Land Trust. We're here on the brink of being able to implement a really special program where 5 families in Lincoln County, 2 here in Lincoln City and 3 in Newport, are looking for homes to purchase on the market. We've been able to pull together resources from a variety of sources to provide them with what's called a buyer-initiated down payment assistance grant. We came to you with an amendment last spring. We've talked about this for quite a few years after we looked at the other approaches to creating more homeownership opportunities that would be permanently affordable, which is what a community land trust offers a community. So it's not just for the home buyers of the home today, it's for future families into down the road. Upon resale, all these homes will be permanently affordable going forward. So we have determined that it would cost each individual home buying family up to $200 more a month if we can't leverage the capacity that Proud Ground brings to the table and the partnership we have with the state of Oregon using the Oregon Bond Mortgage Product Program, in addition to federal grant resources we can bring in and some of our own local resources at Proud Ground to really fill out the gap. It's a pretty simple process. You know, it costs this much to buy a home on the market, and working families can afford this much. We need to fill that gap, and that's what we've done for 5 families. And this is only the beginning. We've worked really hard in the last 3 years to advocate for more investments at the state level for local communities like yours here to support the extraordinary tourism industry and the other small businesses that work here and jurisdictions and larger employers that are having a hard time recruiting people to come here because of the lack of affordable housing units. Homeownership provides permanent stability for families. They can anchor in community, plant gardens, have pets, and raise their children. So what we're asking for tonight is the opportunity to allow the Lincoln Community Land Trust Board of Directors to assign all the responsibilities, obligations, and rights to Proud Ground so we can leverage all the funds that the Commissioner just referenced and bring the maximum amount of affordability to families here. 2 of the 5 families will be are required to be below 80% of median income, which most of you know is a pretty modest income for a family here in this community, and the remaining 3 would be from between 80 and 100% of median income. So this is the final step. While we do anticipate, I want to emphasize this, we do anticipate coming back to you this spring. The board did not vote to integrate the 2 agencies, because we really hadn't had enough conversation with those of you here in the community about what's happened in the last 3 years, where we stand today, and where we're going into the future. So we're going to provide you with an annual report that captures the monthly reports that we hope some of you have seen to indicate, the effort that's gone into this, and to give you even more detail about the importance of the integration. We could have made that decision, and thanks to your city manager and city attorney, pulled back a bit and said, let's take some time and really communicate well with the jurisdictions. You've all been extraordinary supporters of this effort. We're on the brink of making real progress towards increasing the number of homes, and we think that it will lead right into the LIFT program applications that we're working on, if not for the first round, for the second round for sure, where we'll be able to apply the whole model to brand new units of housing going forward, because you all know how low the inventory is in the community. So I'll leave it there, but please, we're very happy to answer any questions you have about this question tonight.
Councilor Casper.
Just logistically, how would this work? If the Proud Ground is in Portland and people apply out here, who's going to facilitate the application process? How does that work?
Very fair question. In fact, we are anticipating more and more of this all around the state, because the LIFT program, by the way, the acronym is Local Innovative Fast Track. It's a Article 11Q bonds that would be used. Really, are we going to require in the first and probably second round partnerships with the community land trust? So we're going to be working with agencies around the state, and also in partnership with the Habitat for Humanity agencies affiliates around the state too. We've got a team that's really well positioned to be able to provide information sessions and counseling and education about how to become mortgage ready, but we also do it in partnership with other agencies. The Willamette Valley Housing Services, they're going to be merging with NEDCO, which is up the valley, so they're going to have more capacity going forward. And they are actually already here in the community, and we work directly with them, so we don't duplicate efforts, and we've coordinated the release of these 5 grants with them, and we'll continue to do that. The resale that we did last summer, we did from Portland, and it worked very well. We work with the local funding, mortgage providers and realtors, and you really do have to have a local connection down here. So it's really worked quite well, and we're confident going forward.
So you will have people, like you said, you have 5 people now, or 2 for our area. Is there like a list that there'll be a next in line family to go through, or somebody on a waiting list?
Yes, it's a first comes, first served proposition. So we are getting the word out about the grants. We have two families in Newport. One had actually made an offer on a home, and we're kind of waiting to see if that works. But yes, there'll eventually be a list, a waiting list that we've orchestrated in the Portland metropolitan area too. So we're pretty familiar with that whole process.
And then, like, the amount of money that has merged together, when that money is spent, then is the program over, or do you tap into, you said you're going to merge into this LIFT program? So when the funds are gone, is this MOU gone? Is it?
No, actually, the whole intent is to increase the number of homeownership opportunities through any number of sources. And we talked originally about identifying land. In fact, the presentation about the police new police building was on a piece of land that we talked about maybe designating for a couple new home units. It's expensive to build these days, and it's challenging. You all know what it's like to go through the permit process pre-development. So we really made a decision to pivot towards employer-initiated grants. I'm very hopeful that I do think the LIFT funding is the highest probability of increasing the number of homes here. There's proposals to increase down payment assistance through increasing the dock recording fee through the legislature this coming round. You have a new, in Newport, there's a new construction excise tax. I don't know if you've considered it here yet, but there's other sources of funds. Plus, we're working with the larger employers to figure out creative ways to help them offer a compensation package that might include some down payment assistance, of which we've seen work and can help. So point is to expand the program.
Okay, so I guess I should educate myself about the LIFT program, perhaps.
I'm happy to send you the framework that the state has about that program. It is a bit of a bureaucratic juggernaut right now, and we're sorting out some of the details, but I'd be happy to send that to you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
It's been 2 rounds of bond funding approved by consecutive legislatures, and correct me if I'm wrong, Diane, but I think the first round did not include any money for home ownership. It was all multifamily, but thanks in part to the advocacy of Proud Ground, our local folks, and others, that the second round did make home ownership eligible.
20% set aside, which is about $16 million over the biennium. So we're hopeful, statewide.
Councilor Hanson. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Walker.
I wanted to clarify something. We understood that there are 2 homes in Lincoln City.
Correct.
But I believe there's one just outside city limits in D-Lake also.
Actually, that ended up, because the efforts to market it were not successful, it ended up being resold on the market and essentially repaying CSC for staffing costs that they had never been paid for, as well as their overhead costs on
So
that.
it's no longer in the program?
Correct. But the 2 homes within city limits are.
Okay.
Councilor Hanson.
You mentioned new homes, and one of the houses in the past, I guess, was a house that was purchased through.
It was neighborhood stabilization funding. It was a large house on a double lot. After that was rehabbed and sold to the first buyers, we then worked with the city to divide the lot, worked with a local contractor to build the new home. And that was the one that recently was resold, thanks to the expertise of Proud Ground.
So then my question is, so either houses that exist or building new, I mean, do you have a preference?
We like to get working families into whatever home unit we can find. And the units that are existing out in your community today are available today. So we're hoping that by this spring, all 5 of the grants will be used. Again, if we can get all of this aligned tonight and going forward. But new units of housing is really the best way into the future to grow the opportunities, just because, again, we need more affordable units in these communities around the state,
So,
especially here.
for example, just hypothetically, if there was an opportunity to partner with a developer when the city's ready to move ahead with development at villages at Cascade Head, I think, we'd be an ideal partner for that to meet the affordable set-aside that you already established when you acquired that land.
So when you're talking about houses, do you also include condos in that?
You can.
Duplexes,
Condos,
multiplexes,
townhouses.
big house partnerships, okay.
Mr. Walke, did you have another question? No, okay. Anyone else down here? No? All right. Maybe. Okay, well, I'll jump in and you think about it.
Go ahead, jump in.
No, go ahead. I'll wait till I'm done.
So I'm woefully uneducated as far as Proud Ground goes. So maybe my dumbness will help some people out there that aren't familiar with it at all. So your main vehicle, or your only vehicle, is ownership, is that correct? You want to provide ownership?
We work in the continuum of affordable housing on the home ownership end of that spectrum for working families, workforce housing, and we do just home ownership. That's correct. Along and partner with Habitat for Humanity, so we work very closely together.
So my question, I guess, would be, the workforce talking to the school district tends to be increasingly more and more mobile. If you're a teacher here and you might get a job in Kentucky and you need to go, and those of us who have bought our homes, it serves, if you're in that type of a situation, which is getting more and more, a house is just an anchor. I mean, you have to sell it, and it's very difficult sometimes to be as transient as you need to be to pick up an opportunity somewhere else. if, I just ask in my mind if some of the proud ground housing might want to be rental. Our rental market, we have 1% availability, which means we have 0%. And maybe that's an indicator of a new demand that's coming down on our formerly residential housing. May in fact.
Councilor Ward, if I may, I think this is not the magic bullet, the magic solution to our housing crisis, and I think it's true that there is a huge need for more rental housing as well, and it's also true that the workforce is more mobile, but, there's a certain class of folks. The reason we initially targeted getting a land trust established here was, I think, when we were doing research for our 2007 homelessness and housing plan, was that we identified, that we were hearing again and again from employers that housing was the #1 barrier to recruitment and retention, and I think that's even more true today. And certainly, say for, well, let me give one example from the county where a very good professional position in our Health and Human Services Department, essentially a third level supervisory position, one recruit left after 9 months, not because, a mid-career professional, basically. He said he loved the job, he loved the community, he loved his colleagues, but after searching 9 months fruitlessly for a quality home that he felt he could afford on his salary, and being tired of living in campgrounds, he decided to move on. And then we had an excellent candidate identified, and she gave us a tentative acceptance. And again, because she was at her stage of life and career where she wanted to put down roots and hoped to stay here for several years, she turned us down once she went home shopping in the county.
I would only add that certainly rental is very important, and we support our colleagues across the state in developing more and oftentimes subsidized rental for lower income families. The rental market statewide is oftentimes is brutal for working families too, because they're at the mercy of landlords, and that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. They don't have as many choices around, some of the questions about where they live and what they can do, and a reliance on the cost of rent. It can go up, and that's something they have to plan for. But it's some families just simply want the opportunity to really own their own home.
Could I offer just one more anecdotal example? Actually, the very first buyers for our first home were a local couple who were living and working in the community. Their lease was up. They went apartment shopping. They said they never even dreamed that they might be able to afford home ownership. Then they stumbled on this and kind of said, hey, what the heck is this? And because it was our very first home, it really took months to work through the process with them, but luckily they were patient. They became homeowners, and the rental unit they vacated then became available. So there is also, I think, going to be a certain ripple effect on this, especially if local folks have the opportunity to move up into home ownership when they haven't seen that before but have wanted it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Just so I'm clear, and I think the question was answered. This is not strictly new construction. You can have a home, there's the money available for remodel.
Yep.
To expand.
Exactly. If a home's on the market, and we'll be targeting homes that are, in overall good condition, not tear downs, but ones that are in reasonably good shape, but just need minimal renovation. And the idea of this buyer-initiated grant is to essentially close the gap for those folks, bring them into the land trust portfolio, so the next buyer will have to meet the eligibility requirements, because it's a great model, which I think is evidenced by the fact, as the memo says, more than 200 land trusts in 45 states in this country. I think the model's been around, if I'm remembering my research correctly, since the late 1960s, but really took off in the late 1980s, because the thinking of our group, 10 years ago that did the housing and homelessness plan was, especially here where the supply is finite and the demand is so great, that to have a mechanism to keep the house affordable through successive ownerships just seemed like, wow, if we could make it work here, it would really fill that niche. And again, where we don't have enough low and moderate income subsidized or open market rental housing, that there are other programs, other agencies that address that need. But this is the one thing to hopefully start pecking away at what a lot of people I've found working on housing now are calling the missing middle, that if you're at 60% or above on average median, and that's why we've targeted 60% all the way up potentially, depending on the funding source, 120%. Those folks often have been priced out of the market, but there's no other opportunity for them to get some assistance.
That leads me to my next question, and the world I dwell in is a much smaller one as an employer, but I hear from staff frequently is, I can't work any more hours because if I do, I'm going to lose my benefits. Does that affect this program? Do they have a demotivation to advance so they can continue to be in this program? Or, and I guess, is it simply a benchmark for getting in, and then that's, once they're in, and they don't have to worry about that mark anymore?
Mayor, that's an excellent question, and this program is designed to help people thrive, to do better going forward. The qualification process we go through is a snapshot in time, and they can give their home, do better over time, make more money. We didn't lose a single home at Proud Ground through the entire recession because these were truly affordable mortgages. But for people to get, do better over time and can even give their house to their children going forward too, and their children could be making, as much money as they can. So it really is an effort to support families to thrive.
Yeah, and I think the fact that there's a careful selection process, there's ongoing support for the families. You said Proud Ground, how many homes in your four-county portfolio?
We have about 275 homes in the portfolio.
And if I remember right, I remember reading a national study that even during the worst of the recession, the foreclosure rate nationally on land trust homes was about 0.5%, far below the market as a whole.
Good. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just a couple things. Just a little clarification in the question. So the memorandum of understanding that's before them today does not integrate Proud Ground and the land trust together. And that's something that you would be bringing at a later date. And that integration essentially dissolves the land trust. So I guess I've got two questions on that. What does that next step do that's different from this? And what would happen if the City Council said no to that integration to this MOU?
Very, very good question. The step you're taking tonight is to allow the local board of directors to assign all of the rights and responsibilities and obligations of this MOU to Proud Ground so that we can again leverage those resources and get the families that we're working on in this current program into these homes. So the urgency is to have that happen right away. The integration will come about through the adoption of a transfer agreement, and it's a legal agreement that takes all the assets, again, responsibilities, obligations, and shifts them to Proud Ground. It's a merger in a sense, but it's integration. And if for any reason this community says we don't want to do that, doesn't want to have that happen, we can go through the process of reassigning this land, because the land trust owns the land underneath the house. That's our mechanism for maintaining permanent affordability. It can go back to the local agency. A little tricky, but it can happen. So this isn't preempting necessarily the decision that we're going to be making together going forward about whether or not the integration truly makes sense. I would add, though, City Manager, that we what we're trying to do, too, is reduce or eliminate the need for really ongoing operating support at all, because the business model that we have at Proud Ground is dependent on very small lease fee the families pay to us to help them support their efforts and the partnership with them, and then the transaction fees upon every resale going forward. So the integration and the move in that direction eliminates the need for the operating support that you've provided in the past. Because you made it very clear to us that you wanted us to come up with a sustainable plan that didn't rely on local resources going into just operational support.
And if we do reach that ultimate point of the local land trust not being a separate legal entity, that removes requirements for generating minutes, separate financial reporting to the state, although we've already discussed as Land Trust Board that Lincoln County operations would be carried as a separate section on Proud Grounds books. But again, putting more resources into actually getting people into homes and less into overhead.
Always a great goal.
Yep.
A couple questions. I know that there's some folks out there, well, I guess they're streaming and not watching us on TV today, but that are interested in property taxes and who's paying them and what happens. And I think because the Proud Ground would own the land, and that's how this works, then there might be a question about the taxes, and then I have a follow-up question.
Homeowners in our program are just like everyone else, but we have negotiated in the Portland area a reduction in property taxes because they don't own the entire piece of land. It's a discounted property tax amount. That is not the case yet here. We might come talk to you about that later. But home buyers here are just the same as anyone else. They pay property taxes. They pay all the other taxes anybody would, unless we can negotiate a discount, which again would reflect the amount of the equity they actually hold in the house.
So when you say they pay the taxes, they pay for the house and for the land?
Here in Lincoln County,
Right,
that's
as
true.
it is now?
Yes.
Unless there are some changes?
Yes. Right.
Okay. And my other question is bigger and more general, is that as you have, I think, the Commissioner mentioned that you have 4 counties now that you're working with, and if that's growing and how that stretches you and your staff and how you're able to still function and provide the services that we would be agreeing to by continuing working with you.
Well, I again, thanks to Commissioner Hall's leadership, Lincoln County has been on the forefront of really being one of the rural counties that have kind of taken this on. So we've really gotten very familiar and connected here, and with the Commissioner's role on our Board of Directors, he'll be watching what we're doing and bringing that voice to the table. And again, the local advisory committee is going to be very important. It's a little complicated, but the role of Proud Ground is really just to steward the public resource that's been put into these homes. It's a stewardship role, and it's a very specific, pretty limited role. We just make sure that all the agreements we made with every jurisdiction's federal, state, local level are adhered to the letter of the law. It's a accountability piece, really. And because we have enough homes to continue the revenue just generated through our lease fees and transaction fees, so into the future, the more homes we bring into the portfolio, the stronger it makes the land trust over time. So that's the way we generate, the mechanism for making sure that we're able to follow through on all the requirements.
And Proud Ground has existed, what, about 25 years more?
20.
Yeah, okay, 20.
Years.
And so I would say, wouldn't it be fair to say it's a mature organization which has the resources and institutional strength that you really felt that you could take on this working relationship in the first place, and now evolved with this new role?
I wish I could take full credit. I've only been director for 4 years. People before me really reached the place of sustainability, and to their credit, I was able to inherit that. But we're the largest in the Pacific Northwest, and I think about the 4th largest in the country, community land trust.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all you've done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
All right, we are now to the bid of
Action?
Some action on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I move to approve revision to assign the memorandum of understanding.
Were you even able to hear that? I didn't think so.
I'm sorry. I move to approve revision and assignment of the memorandum of understanding. The program.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion? Hearing none, I imagine I need a roll call on this one.
Williams?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
Walke?
Yes.
And Ward?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And thank you for the reminder on that. Okay, bid award, Ballard Building roof replacement. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So I have before you tonight a bid award for the roof replacement of the Glass Studio or the Ballard Building. And I'm here to answer any questions. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but you did a bid award last year, and we had some issues when the contractor went to permitting. And so we decided that we needed to go out for another bid and really have more of a concerted effort to get our 3 bids. We requested several bids at the first request, but we really were not successful in getting 3 bids. It's just really tough getting bids in this economy, which is great for our contractors, but tough for people who want to get work done. So at this point in time, we've got 3 bids before you, and staff is recommending that the bid go to the lowest responsible bidder as Linen Roofing and Siding in the amount of $72,000. And due to the age of the building, we are requesting 20% contingency just to have a safe upper limit. And we're hoping that we'll be below that amount. So the total requested bid award is $86,400. Are there any questions?
Councilor Hinton.
Why was P&G not?
Go ahead.
What did you say?
I called Councilor Hinton.
Sorry. Go ahead. I'm fine.
That's
I
okay.
didn't
I wanted some more discussion about the 20% contingency because I understand this is difficult, but I don't know why 20% would be needed. So if you could help me.
Sure. When the bids come in, they, we talked about this a little bit earlier with bidding, but they bid it to the best of their understanding. But until they actually take off the existing roof, they won't know how much plywood needs to be replaced because of dry rot. And the building, the roof is about 10 years or a little bit more than that in age, and there have been some leaks, which it hasn't, it's hard to know where the leaks start, which is why we're doing the roof replacement. But if there's been water that's been passing from the top of the roof into the interior space, we can reasonably assume that there's going to be some dry rot in between that roof structure. So until we get into the project, we won't know exactly how extensive that dry rot is.
Mr. Hoagland? Why did P&G not meet the request?
We asked in our bid to have a 20-year certified manufacturer warranty. And there are a couple different components to a warranty. One is on labor and one is on materials. And it's our understanding that a typical commercial roof has a 20-year certified manufacturer warranty that covers labor and the materials. And that was not a component of their bid.
Anyone else? No? All right. Motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the award, to approve a bid award to Linen Roofing and Siding, the Ballard Building, roof replacement in the amount of $72,000 to replace existing with new roof, and include a 20% contingency of $14,400 for a total bid award of $86,400.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Anderson?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
Walke?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
And Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. You know, I'm sorry, I didn't even look. Ron, maybe you can just answer my question. When will this begin? Allison? When will this begin?
When will it begin?
We don't know. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Just don't want things to get worse.
Before we go on to Colleen, we've got the item we added.
Thank you. We have the appointment to the Arts Committee. Stay seated, Colleen, it's fine.
Mr. Mayor, I was one of the interviewees for, this is the Public Art Committee, and actually Deanna and myself interviewed separately, together but separately, Nikki Price. And a little history, Nikki was first approved for this committee 2 years ago, so she served a already interrupted term of 2 years and now would be in a position to move forward with a 4-year term as a city resident. I think you all know Nikki Price with the Cultural Center. The term is 3 years. Okay. And, you know, she remains very outstanding and involved in the arts, and certainly has my recommendation to the council.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I also interviewed Nikki Price, and she's outstanding. She's very organized and task-oriented, and when, especially within the arts community, brainstorming easily happens, and she keeps everyone on task, so I really appreciate that. She's the current chair of this committee, and I've been to a couple of their meetings, and she does an excellent job, and I also highly recommend her.
Okay, get a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to appoint Nikki Price to a city resident position on the Arts Council for a partial term expiring December 31st of 2020.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder on that. All right, we are into city manager, city attorney reports. Mr. Manager, your evaluation form?
It is my time for evaluation again, and we have been working on an evaluation form to use with our staff.
Who is we?
Colleen has been the spearheader of it, but it's been all of the department heads. And we're very satisfied with what we're implementing as far as our staff goes. And I wanted Colleen to present that to you tonight to be used for my evaluation.
Thank you. So, as Ron stated, we started having this discussion, and this discussion about our evaluation forms came up as a result of my attending the Society of Human Resources National Convention this past summer, and him going to his national convention for city managers. And the reoccurring theme within that is that the way evaluations are done, have been done in the past, and that we need to move to more goal-oriented type of evaluations that give employees immediate feedback on and goals to work on, where they get satisfaction in completing those instead of focusing on things that happened in the past, because those things are in the past. They probably have already been addressed. Some of the things, and this is being adopted by the industry. Industry standards are changing, and it's partially because there was such a heavy emphasis on financial rewards and punishments, and it only held people accountable for past behavior. And what we really want to be doing is grooming talent for the future, both of which are critical to our organization and long-term success. The things that we found with the current performance evaluation system is managers and supervisors dreaded doing these evaluations. We had to hound, and they wouldn't do it. And it's partially because they were so cumbersome. Our evaluation form was 8, 9, 10 pages long. The point system in it was very skewed. If someone, was really good on attendance, but maybe not so great on another thing, it made their scores, not really a real true score, and they really didn't mean anything to anybody. And didn't focus on goals and moving forward, and didn't give the employee anything to work towards. So we presented this to the department heads in November and finalized it in December after they made comments on this form as to some changes they wanted, how they wanted to see it. And we are now rolling this out with all the employees this month in January. And this is going to be the new performance evaluation that's going to be utilized. And part of the reason for going this and the acceptance of it is it gives a clear roadmap on how the employee is doing, what their supervisor's expectations are, and provides goals for the employee to achieve. It does away with a point system that really had no value to anybody. It simplifies the form so it's not so cumbersome. The feedback from the directors was they would be more inclined to get these done versus not doing them at all and us hounding them over and over. Another really great thing about it, it's a fluid form, so it doesn't have to be done annually. It can be done monthly, it can be done quarterly, semi-annually, whatever that supervisor and the employee feels is the best fit for that employee. If there's a performance issue, they may want to do it more on a monthly basis to address that performance issue. Or on, for instance, a new employee who is in a probationary period, they may want to do it, in 3 months and then 6 months, just to give that employee the feedback and to help them to continue to be successful in their job and retaining them. And then it just provides a tool for employees with performance issues. So based on all this, Mr. Chandler and I had several discussions, and he really likes this aspect of this form as well and really would like to see it be used in his performance evaluation. He's also talked about, the fluidity of his evaluation and his goals that are tied to your goals as the city council, and how those goals are always changing or evolving, and he would even be open to more, even doing this not even on an annual basis but on a quarterly basis, on a more informal basis. And so I'm here tonight to ask that you approve using this new form for Mr. Chandler. We have talked to Mr. Apichello about also using this form. He would prefer to stay with the old form for his evaluation for this year, but he said he would be open to it in the following years. So with that, if you have any questions, concerns?
Mr. Mayor, sorry. I was coughing, and I'm sorry, but I didn't hear who said that they'd be happy with using the current evaluation form this year.
Mr. Chandler.
Okay.
Our city attorney.
Oh, your city
will continue to operate
attorney
under
would like
his for the
to
time being.
continue with the form that's been established, but said he would be open to using the new form moving forward for the next evaluation.
Apologies for that. I do have a few other things.
Sure.
And first of all, just because I have so many comments, I would have preferred to do this in a work session, but rather than a council meeting. But I just wanted to say that I really like the point system, and I can understand why you were saying that others don't like it. But for me, I like it because it's not as general. I mean, the other evaluation form was more specific, and this one is more general. And it only gives you 3 categories. And actually, I think a range of 5 is more, it's better. For example, the first category up there is where it's to full potential. And I have a high expectation of that particular category. So I would want to give like maybe a 4, which is more than a 3. But I always assume that people are going to continue to grow and do better. So there isn't anywhere for me to actually, how could I mark my concerns on that? So.
Well, and if you don't mind if I interject, so if you look at the bottom part where it says strengths, training needs, detail employees' greatest strengths, but then details aspects requiring improvement, and then achieve goals set in previous review, and then it goes into the goals for the next review. And so what this does is lays the foundation, whether they're not meeting the requirements, they're meeting the requirements, or they exceed the requirements, and then that flows down into the bottom half. And the space here isn't very much, but there's a second page that allows for additional comment and feedback on that. It's more of a
I get that, but where would you put a 4? Would you put it in meets
I
Or
would
would
say
you put it
meets
in exceed?
expectations.
No, you wouldn't. Let me explain this and why I really like this. So we'll use the first one, which is that works to full potential. If you were to evaluate me that says does not meet the requirements, or does meet the requirements, or even exceeds the requirements, that doesn't mean there are not areas for improvement. And so let's say you even put exceeds the requirement, but there are still other areas to prove it that would take it even beyond that. That then goes down into your things to work on for the next time. The thing that I like about this is it brings the focus into the areas where the employees can improve, and you're focused on that rather than 3, 3.5, 4, 2.5. And so combined with that is the idea that it doesn't have to be, in my opinion, nor should it be, just an annual performance. It's something that I could regularly meet with you, or as I regularly meet with our staff, to touch base, see how they're doing. So it moves the focus really into improving upon their performance, no matter where they score in it. Just an example. If you put my evaluation that I exceed the requirements on everything, that certainly does not mean I'm perfect in doing my job. There still could be things that I could be doing better. And those are the things that I want to focus on, is what you can do better, not what the points are.
Right. I have another question. There's an item in there, I guess under quality is how they're listed, but category that says communication. Mm-hmm. And so that includes everything, and my notes to myself when I was reading this as well, what about communication with the council? I mean, that's kind of a different type of communication, and this is generic, and I
So what doesn't show on this form is that this is a form that's been developed in Kronos, so it's an electronic form that we're going to be utilizing towards going more paperless. And there's actually pull-down menus that gives a description of what each one of those functions mean, and I can provide those descriptions to you so you can see, and it gives it more detail. If you can make it whatever you want to make it, but, with the city manager, absolutely, it's going to be his communication with the city council, it's going to be his communication with the public, it's going to be his communication with his department heads, all of those. And so, yes, you would be evaluating on that.
Let me just add to that again. One of the advantages of the broad category is that as you look at this, and let's say that you say, great, his communication with the residents is terrific, but it's not doing well with us. Well, that's where you again go back down to the part that needs improvement, and so you're going to focus in on the areas that you think need improvement. You may end up, if I was doing this and Colleen was being evaluated and she communicates well with the public but not with me, I might put a note in there, you're doing a great job with the public, but here's what you need to do with communication with me, and then go into how that takes place.
Okay. So my next question is in the category of coworker relations and client relations. The only way that I would know how to answer that, because there's not an NA on here, is to interview them, and I don't know that we would be doing that. So
I think one of the things that we talked about at the end of the evaluation process last year is that you actually do have just as you do with the judge's review that you're working on now, is we encourage you to talk to employees, to, go observe in court, those types of things, so that you can evaluate based on that criteria. And I encourage you to do that, especially with department heads, because we're the ones that work with them on a day-to-day basis and have, that insight on a day-to-day basis versus maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks that you may have that interaction with them.
And that's a change from how we did it last year.
Correct.
Okay, I see.
But just let me know who stabs me in the back, that's all I ask.
All right. I do have another thing, just in the, under the goals section. I think we need another goal for housing, and maybe this list of goals should come out of our overall goals.
Are you talking about the last page?
Yes, and some of these things, we should be doing them anyway, so, but I guess this would just show more emphasis, like street maintenance.
Okay.
Aren't we supposed to be doing that anyway?
So you would like me to add housing to that list? That's
Well,
not a
I see
problem,
it
if
missing.
everybody's okay with that.
And like community outreach and organizing and emergency planning and all these other type of things that.
This just came from the one from last year, so.
Yeah, I
I don't
recognize
think there's
it.
anything precluding us from, while we're in our discussions, to add something. And
Right.
we all
That,
feel we
that's your
need to add it,
prerogative.
then
If
we
you
add it.
guys feel
Then you
community
incorporate
outreach
it
is
later.
something, then you.
Yeah, that last page is meant to be as a guide and not a definitive list of things.
I apologize for interrupting here. Anything else?
Because, anyway, the rest of my notes beyond that is just I would remove construction and engineering and street maintenance and put those under public works, and we really seem to be addressing a lot of this in the budget process, so.
Well, maybe that's something we can talk about during the review itself, and we do still have that freedom to organize this the way we want.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think the thought process is that you guys have your priorities as a council, and his priorities are based on those priorities in many ways, and so how you determine those priorities that's your prerogative, and that's what you work with him together on to establish, and then he has those goals, and then you work to get those goals achieved.
Move us along, Councilor Casper.
Colleen, is this form intended to be used on all employees or just department heads and
Yes.
managers? Then my question would be, are there employees with collective bargaining agreements where this form might impact the evaluation process that has been negotiated?
No. There is actually nothing in their union contract with regards to the type of evaluation form that is used or how their evaluations are done. That
I
is
also might point out that this is being used for everybody except the police department.
Right.
They are unique in what their duties and their training and their everything is, so we are using a different evaluation form for the police department.
Okay, that was my question,
Yeah,
because
and
they
I'm
do
working-
have a collective bargaining agreement.
right. But again, their performance evaluations, that isn't part of the collective bargaining agreement and what the structure of it is. But I am going to be working with the chief on a similar electronic type form that we're going to be using for the police department that's more geared towards their unique job functions.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt?
One more person want to say something?
If I could, just, not knocking anyone here, but I know that we need, if you could just get my attention. I'm seeing lots of hands go up, and I just want to make sure we're all saying, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Williams, and then I get you called. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, or Ward.
Thank you. To me, I would like to see the top, not, right now it's like a, sorry, don't mean to be disjointed here. Right now we have three options: does not meet, meets, exceeds. And so if you were to do this like you got grades in school, we have A, C, and F. And frankly, I would like to see A, B, C, D, F, because it allows us to get a little sharper instrument there. Because right now, doing these, I don't know what to give him, because I would like to give him one under excellent sometimes, but I'm forced to either give him excellent or average. And to me, when our city manager gets an average, he fails, because he's our city manager. He should be a 9 or a 10, which he is a 9 or a 10. And so I would like to me, more choices gives you a sharper hone on it.
Whether it's by the point system or the alphabet system. That's what we're trying to move away from, so that, again, it focuses more in on the areas of improvement and the areas of praise. So again, if I was excellent in everything, which I'm not, but if I was, I'm close. But if I was, that does not mean I'm perfect. And so that means there's still areas for improvement. So the whole concept behind this is to move us to discussing the things that can be improved upon rather than what the grade is.
Okay.
And Councilor Ward, just to expand upon that, this did have more categories when it was originally presented to the department heads, and based on the feedback from the department's heads, they felt that it needed to be narrowed down to just 3. They don't meet the requirements, they meet the requirements, and meeting the requirements does not mean they're average. It means that they are doing the job that is expected of them, and if they go to exceeds, they're going above and beyond what that is. And a good example of that is in this first sample I had, I did a fake one for me that I did of myself that Ron didn't do. And I put punctuality and attendance as excellent because I'm here pretty much every day, usually at 7 earlier, oftentimes, and I stay late. And he would concur with that. But he could probably expand upon that and say, you know, Colleen, you don't need to come in that early. And maybe just take a few more minutes at home and have some coffee or whatever, you know. So that's where that feedback comes back in is, you know, even though I'm really great on those things, I could probably have a better work-life balance and not be coming in so early.
My point is, the fewer the challenges, or the fewer the choices, the blunter the instrument. I don't know if that makes any sense.
There is the possibility that you would have more do not exceed expectations because there are fewer choices. But I don't necessarily consider that a bad thing. You will highlight the things that I would need to work on, and hopefully as I work on those, then they move themselves up. But again, the idea is to focus more on areas of improvement and to provide praise than it is to assign a grade.
And then a couple of these seem to me to be graded toward a lower level employee, and one is independent work. We assume that he's the city manager. All the work he does is independent. He's the boss.
Right.
And we didn't hire a middle-level boss. We hired a high-level boss. And so I would just bring that to your attention. And then attendance, again, he's the boss. So I don't care about his attendance because as long as he gets the job done,
right,
because he's the boss.
Right. But sometimes there might be a boss that there is attendance issues and you need to address it.
Okay, and so can we be provided by you I don't know how many days, for example, the city manager is supposed to get off. I don't know how many days he actually takes off because nobody tells me. So if we're to evaluate his attendance, then we need to know his attendance record.
I would be more than willing to provide that information to you, and that's something very easily pulled out of that.
That was it.
I can tell you he pretty much is a workaholic like I am. And
if he were C-level or
right,
average level, we wouldn't have hired him.
Right.
So.
Right. But, I mean, I can tell you that I have seen instances where you have a high-level executive who, you know, appears to be there every day working and appears to be getting the job done, but in actuality, they're not there hardly ever, and that that is an issue that you would want to be bringing up because your expectation is, I expect you to be there Monday through Friday, at least the bulk of those hours that the rest of your employees are there. And then that's when you start uncovering, oh, well, they didn't do this, they didn't do this, they didn't do this. Well, that might be tied to the fact that they're never there.
Mr. Mayor.
please.
So, I mean, ultimately, I think we're trying to see if somebody's going to get a raise or not. And so we have from 1 to no, not at all. This has nothing to do with that.
These are not tied to pay
Oh,
at
well,
all.
then never mind.
Our pay is tied to the union contracts, and, I mean, there could be an instance where someone's performance is not great, and we may hold off on a step increase, but no, it's not tied to pay at all.
Okay. Anyone
Mr. Mayor.
else? Please.
If I can jump on that, Riley, you brought up an excellent point, because I think as worker bees, paycheck getters, we've perhaps all been under performance reviews that were tied to compensation. Not so in this world. So I like this. One, it seems much more managing and coaching review, which is still so much important to get more work out of people, or the correct work. And I'll tell you, I'm one of those that dread our existing forums, because I spend way too much time trying to think up the words in those boxes to describe what I liked or didn't like about a certain activity. And I'd much rather spend time on, telling someone, what I dislike, a one-liner kind of thing down here, how to improve. So I'd love to try it. I think there'll be bugs worked out as we move through, but I'm in sync.
Now, how about a motion?
And the motion would be to approve this
To
new
adopt
form?
the new performance review form for the performance review of the city manager.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion.
Mr.
Hearing-
Mayor?
Oh, Lord, we're so close.
It's short, because I am.
Counselor Gaspar.
If this doesn't work out, can we revisit it?
Absolutely. It's a work in progress.
Okay.
I mean, we're rolling this out to the employees. We may get feedback and make tweaks to it as well on the, not the executive level, but we feel it's a move in the right direction to grooming our employees, praising them where there's praise needed, giving them goals to work towards, and feeling a sense of accomplishment in achieving those goals, rather than focusing on something that happened 9 months ago that is
So we can
completely
hear about its effectiveness next year?
Absolutely. I'd be
Hopefully
more than
bef-
happy to
hopefully
give you a
before that.
report on that.
I'm done now, Mr. Mayor.
Well, and I think we've heard, too, that there's room to move this to a quarterly, and I think we have that authority to say, hey, we're going to bump this up a little early to have discussion.
And it can be on a much more informal basis.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be so formal. It's more of a, you guys do it. You
We
can
still
even
have the authority
discuss
to
it
say,
in
yes. Okay.
regular session and non-executive.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Anything else from you, Ron?
Yes, I have two other things that I was asked earlier to discuss, to bring up a little bit. The first of those is the status on the warming shelter and where that sits with that. Let me give you just a little bit of time frame associated with the land use issues regarding the zoning ordinance. On December 5th, our city planner issued a notice of administrative decision, which basically stated that the warming shelter could not operate within the requirements of the zone, and that was sent on the 5th to the warming shelter president. On the 15th, that decision was appealed by the warming shelter, and their reasons, and I believe I have sent you those documents, spelled out their appeal. A hearing has been set for January 16th on that appeal, and that hearing goes to the Planning Commission. On January 2nd, we issued a notice of violation that went to both the warming shelter and the owners of the property, and that gave them 10 days to provide an assurance of voluntary compliance. The assurance of voluntary compliance comes in, then that is reviewed by our planner, who then looks at it, makes a comment, almost like a recommendation, and it then goes to the judge for a decision on the merits of their assurance of voluntary compliance. Now, our planner did suggest some language and some things that he would look upon favorably in an assurance of compliance. And at this point, we are just simply waiting to receive those. So nothing has taken place at that. Once that comes in, it will be reviewed, and then the planner will review it, and then it will be sent to the judge, and we'll proceed from there. One of the options that our planner discussed with them is the idea of getting the discussion of this before the legislative body, before the Planning Commission, and then to you. There are some broad implications, and the decision that the planner made, and that will be reviewed by the Planning Commission, and it would be, I feel at least, it would be very appropriate to have those implications discussed by the Planning Commission, who would then give a recommendation to you. The other thing that it would do is that zoning is always difficult. There's always competing interests that people have, and so this would provide the opportunity to have as many people have the opportunity to hear it and to be able to voice their interests, no matter what they may be. So that's where the warming shelter stands. At this point, we're just simply waiting to see if the assurance of compliance comes in. And once that does, then the next steps will go from there. Any questions on that? Okay.
Ron, I guess, again, more for public entity, this has not come at all before any one of Planning Commission or City Council, so
That's
we
correct.
have not had the opportunity to weigh in.
That's correct. Everything at this point has been done by staff.
And by ordinance or state land use? Or
That's correct. Trying to, it's been our best attempt to implement the ordinances and to enforce the ordinances that we have, and to interpret the ordinances as they've been written.
The other thing is the code enforcement violation in 10 days doesn't dovetail into the 16th appeal process. Those are two separate.
Those are two separate things. The letters of assurance have to be in by the 12th, 5 o'clock on the 12th.
Right. And yeah, I think that's
okay. Okay. The other thing that I was asked to discuss was some personnel issues. Recently, there was an article that a blogger had put out regarding one of our personnel members, and there's been a lot of information that I've recently heard that has been coming and going about that. And I wanted to just take a minute and talk a little bit about these things on a general basis on personnel issues. Personnel issues are always sensitive. They're always difficult. They always involve more than one person. People's families become involved. They could involve more than one employee. And they're very difficult, very sensitive things. There are also rights that employees have by law on information that can be divulged and information that cannot be divulged. And so what I would what I would say to everybody, you, reporters, bloggers, and anybody who's listening, is to be very cautious on things that you discuss, to be cautious on assumptions that are being made, on reports that are being made. As a general rule, there's only about 2 or 3 people that know information about disciplinary issues, and that I would suggest that if anybody has a question, to call me or email me, and then I can take whatever appropriate action is necessary to answer that. There will be some things I can answer. There probably will be many things that I cannot because they're personnel related.
Tonight.
That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Apicello.
We had an executive session scheduled for 4 o'clock. It had nothing to do with me. But I did send you a memo, litigation update. I was going to send it to you last year, but I updated it, sent it out. Not too much of a change. But I did tell you I was waiting for a response from outside counsel on the Smith litigation. On, I guess it was Friday sometime, Bob did receive something from Mr. Smith. I sent that, scanned it and sent it to you guys today with a password. Obviously, with the lateness of the hour, I don't think we're going to be going into an executive session and calling Bob and waking him up. But I did talk to him about giving an answer to Mr. Smith either at this meeting or the next meeting. So maybe you can count on setting some time aside at the next council meeting to give a yes, no, maybe here's our response. So with your permission, I'll get with Mr. Chandler and schedule some brief executive session to talk about it.
Appreciate that. Yay. That's it? Mr. Appicello, that's it tonight? Yes. All right, thank you. We had no work sessions, additional comments from citizens present on non-agenda items. Seeing none.
Mayor?
What?
Mayor, I'm sorry, I do have something to add. We have the month of July for 2018. There is when we have our meetings with the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and with the county, our annual meeting, and they're asking for us for council to confirm a date. The Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians would like either the 9th or the 23rd of July to be confirmed to have our meeting, and we host this year the meeting with them. And then the Lincoln County Commissioners would like their joint session with us either on the July 11th, 18th, or 25th, and those are Wednesdays.
I can't go that far.
What was the first date?
The 9th of July.
The two meetings that we have are in July are the 9th and the 23rd. Those are the Monday meetings for the tribal meeting.
And then, I mean, we're here anyway, so it doesn't really matter one way or the other, right? Or do we forego our meeting?
The 9th is a city council meeting.
City council meeting,
Yes.
so the 23rd.
So it wouldn't be a joint?
No, we have to change it to the other, we have to change
Yeah.
it to the off.
Be the 2nd,
So
16th, or 30th.
So it would be, yes, 2nd, 16th, and the 30th.
2nd's so close to Canada Day, I don't know if I'll be rested. Try. Oh, well, that is the July 4th week, so
Yeah.
maybe
I think
the
last
16th
year it
or the-
was like the 18th, so I don't know, maybe the 16th would be a good day.
Yeah. Sure.
That sound good? 16th of July?
And we will host.
Okay, and then the joint meeting with Lincoln County would be the 11th, the 18th, or the 25th Wednesdays.
I have no preference.
Do it the same week.
I prefer the 11th would work great for me. The other two, I'm out of town.
11th? Is 11th okay for everyone?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, all right.
Well,
That'll be
that's-
the 11th.
6 p.m., correct?
Yes, 6 p.m.
City, or county commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
And we host, yes, they're going to be here. Okay, great. Okay. All right. Anyway, back to no one here. Great. Nobody wants to say anything. Thank you very much. Announcements or comments by City Council? Mr. Ward? I'm sorry. Someone say something. I'm just not seeing little fingers
Mr.
go up.
Mayor.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I would just like us to have a discussion about emergency preparedness and just get an update about what we are. The last one was for the eclipse, and I'm interested in seeing what we have scheduled. Hopefully some cash discussion could happen and whatever budget relates to that, and whatever else is up Mark's sleeve.
Okay. Councilor Ward?
Okay. This is kind of in response to Mr. Chandler. Since this is the first meeting of the year, I feel like it's important to take a look at where we've been and where we're going. And for me, as a first-time counselor, it's been a challenging 3 years. Having said that, being a counselor can be very rewarding at times, particularly when you feel like you actually may have made a positive difference. What has not been rewarding is when we experience behavior of a councilman that is unbecoming to the council. We have seen a lot of that behavior over the last 3 years, and we have started the new year with plenty of trouble on our plates. To combat this type of behavior, we have in place the city charter and Resolution 2008.47 titled Rules in Conduct and Decorum. But unless we enforce these rules, these documents mean little. Currently, we have a mayor that is accused of self-dealing. We also have confidential city employee information that was possibly leaked to the public by a council member. This is serious stuff. That's a crime. It's a Class A misdemeanor. And this is just the new stuff. We still have plenty of malicious freight that has been carried over from the last year. Clearly, we can't go on this way. I would like to make a motion to set up a meeting open to the press and the public so that the council can address these and other behaviors and the role of the council in holding each member accountable for their actions. So if anyone would like to make that motion, I would be happy. Nobody?
Well, you made the motion.
Yeah, if anybody want a second, I would be happy.
Can we have discussion?
Sure.
Can you table?
So you got to get a second, don't you, for discussion?
No.
Okay.
We can talk.
Okay.
I don't know, can you share with me what that session might look like? I'm not, quite frankly, I'm not interested in an open forum of every Tom, Dick, and Harry or Kip, yelling at me and challenging me and everything else. So I would like to, control the situation somehow. And I think your overall goal is certainly communication, number one, and sharing of information, because there's certainly a lot of inaccurate information out there. But I'm troubled and frustrated with what that communication tool would look like.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what it would look like either, but it is referred to in, I think, the city council's conduct and decorum. What tools do we have to deal with a situation where one of the council people are out of line? Right now, our solution is to do nothing. And I think that when we do nothing about it, we betray the trust of the community.
Well, now you've just changed what I heard your motion being, because, yes, the council has that ability, but your motion that you were going to make talked about engaging the public and the press.
No, I didn't say engaging. I said open to the public. We have an obligation to be transparent, so this isn't a meeting that we can have in the back room.
If I might interject, something that was brought up a couple of years back is that we do have an opportunity to, an option. I'm not finding my right words. The League of Oregon Cities to get involved in these things, to facilitate discussions. So it's not a free-for-all. If you have a plan and an objective, these people are trained in this, and you have a trained mediator who can move a discussion forward, not just in a finger-pointing, I hate you kind of thing. And that's something I could support wholeheartedly. But your motion, I'm going with Councilor Anderson here, a little broad for my taste.
Well, the motion can be easily worked upon, but the intent needs to go
and
forward.
That's why we wanted to get you talking, so we get, make sure we understand the intent before we second or vote for a motion.
Right. And we need to be able to deal with a problem when it happens. And right now, we don't really, if we do have the tools and I'm overlooking them, we're certainly not using them.
That was the word I was looking for. I think that is the tool that we have, and that's the starting place. If we were to say, make a motion to engage them, reach out to them, however we do that, and you found that unsatisfactory, well, we tried something that didn't work, and you can move forward from there. But I like the idea of having a structure that's been through these things, facilitating, if you want to go forward in this direction at all anyway.
I would go for something like that. I'm looking for more structure and assistance from, in essence, professional that can help us.
My goal here is to get it on the table and we start to deal with it. Because if you turn a blind eye and it just gets worse. There's no repercussions. Do what you choose.
Right. I hear you. So the motion would be...
well, you're good at motions.
Well, then, just for clarity's sake, do you want to withdraw yours? And
There's been no second.
Yeah, there was no second.
Okay, okay, then it's dying for no second, correct?
Right.
At least throwing one in. Okay.
So let's try one. Mr. Apicella or Ron, can you help us? Motion being more to allow council and through staff to engage a professional mediator, preferably or at least through League of Cities who does this, to help us with communication and
mediator, facilitator to help you with collegial conversation and cooperation or something like that.
But I would also add into that also to discuss the options that are available, as Mr. Ward talked about, the options that are available to council when there is an issue that needs to be dealt with.
We had actually, during the discussion of the limited council rules amendment we just made, we talked about maybe having a work session and talking more broadly about the council rules. So this might be a good time to
incorporate them.
Do that.
So how's that sound for a motion?
Sounds good to me, incorporating what
Yes,
Ron
including
Chandler put in
incorporation.
there. Yeah, I would make that motion.
I already did. You could. How about you second it?
I'll
yet?
second it.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all spend money on that, or we're just telling you to start. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I
please.
don't know if somebody else, but
Thank you.
I kind of like numbers, and as we're kind of midway through our fiscal year, and given different communications that's out there, I can always tell a news reporter or blogger or citizen who doesn't know how to read a budget, especially a city budget. And so I brought our budget, the one that's public knowledge. And, just to pick some stuff out, I casually looked at the city attorney's department. And it's interesting, how complicated these budgets are. But, there's a line item that says regular full-time salary. And then you go over to the line and it says approved budget. And it says $1,809.28. That's the salary of the city attorney. Now, you can come up with all sorts of other numbers like 197,000, just to throw a number out, but that incorporates other people and benefits and everything else. But, there's a word salary that council controls. So I would be more than happy and make myself available to anybody, council or public, that is interested in better understanding the budget, because of all of you, have a little more time with our budget process and would share that in-depth knowledge if somebody wants to ask me before they start writing things.
Anybody else? Going. Please.
There was a comment made during the public comment section, the beginning of the meeting, about a possible committee meeting with John Force. I'd like your reaction.
I think it's appropriate for me to review with our attorney, with Mr. Drystat and others, our interpretation of the ordinance and of the permitting process to make sure I include the police chief in that to make sure we're doing it correctly. I don't know that that requires us to have people that are on the outside of the organization to participate in that, but I do think there's merit in following through with that.
Okay. Two things, if I might. I had a chance, let's see, I believe it was Friday, the new addition going through Dundee, or around Dundee, was opened. It was just a 4-mile stretch. Got to drive that on Saturday, late afternoon. It was exciting and frustrating as heck because I had in my mind, gosh, I'm going to get to go fast, and I seem to be behind every 45-mile-an-hour driver there was. But it was a nice change. It was a little disorienting where it ends up at. I was expecting to be closer to 99. You have to kind of loop back through a semi-residential apartment area. And I'm concerned about how...
Mr. Mayor, let me interrupt you right there, because, and I agree with you. Let me help you. What you drove on, and is only Phase 1.
Correct.
Phase 2 will take it out of that intersection that fouled you up and move it north on the other side of by the hospital. Right. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
But I agree with you. It was known to be create another congestion there.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not a criticism. It was just a reflection on the moment. But it was odd to get past Dundee. It really was to come. I go, where did it go? And it was done. And so bravo to ODOT and the different cities involved. And so it's going to mean a lot to us. And I spoke briefly with Ron about this, that I really think it's something the city needs to trumpet through the VCB. Because I look back on my own experience as someone who would travel to the coast from the valley, is some days I would just say, forget it, I'm not going to make that trip. I'm going north. And it's a lot easier because I knew how it was coming home. So another reason to not come here, or to come here, not go there. So.
And Mayor, compliments to you and, of course, to myself, because, it has taken that long to build that thing that you and I, on behalf of this council, have written letters of support to ODOT to fund that thing just for this purpose. So, I mean, I would encourage this council and future councils to continue to support Phase 2 of that, because if we can get more people in ease to the coast, we're better off.
And I would encourage people to remember Dundee once that's there, that you still need to pull off occasionally and visit their great wineries and restaurants. And then the next, just Ron, you sent out a memo briefly about our participation in the Rose Festival. And I was concerned that the memo said we did it. You didn't say this exactly, but I was implying or inferring that this was all for the Pixie Fest benefit. And our original discussions with the Rose Festival was to just have Lincoln City representation within these mini float things. So if that was your impression that we were doing it just to promote the Pixie Fest, I didn't have that.
No, the question that I really have, and I've heard from 3 of you, 2 of you said we ought not to, and 1 of you said we should, is whether or not you want to continue. We would not do Pixie Fest again. I brought up that the Pixie Fest, they did not see a significant increase in their event due to the fact that they were being really marketed by the city through the float. The cost is going to be somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000. We would not be doing Pixie Fest again this year. We would do something else. We're at a point where we need to make a decision on whether or not we want to go forward with being in that. Like I said, it's $5,000 to $10,000 plus a lot of staff time, and I just need to know your level of interest. If you want us to move forward, we will. If that's not something you feel strongly about, then we have other things we can do.
I would like to see it continue. The whole point was to get Lincoln City represented, not an event. And
Sure.
I think because of the constraints of the signage that we were allowed in the size, there was no way. I mean, this little 8.5 by 11 sign that said Pixie Fest, it wasn't going to do it. And, everyone did a great job, I know, saying, but it was to represent Lincoln City, and that's what all the other cities did.
Sure.
They incorporated elements of their city that they're proud of in their float. And I think it's well worth, and we talk about the value of, I forget what the advertisers say, but that extra value we get from being on TV, being in the news, the interviews, and the community just passing through. I walked the route, and Kip was there as the pilot of the craft, and the others, and I just got nothing but love and thanks and everybody.
If there's again, it's up to you. If there's a consensus to go forward, I'm fine with that. If there's a consensus not to go forward, I'm fine with that as well. We just need to assign a group of staff to begin making this happen.
Or perhaps they could revise what they were planning on doing and then let us know.
Who could revise?
BCB or whoever is going to be in charge of promoting this to, getting us back involved. There was a big involvement with doing the Pixie Fest, getting the float built.
The float itself mostly was there were two components of it. It was mostly staff. When we got the golf cart that we used, our Public Works Department cut off the top and enabled it so it could be built a frame around it. We paid for the materials and then used the high school upstairs to help construct the frame that would be used, and the frame's still usable. The part that we need to do now is to work on whatever the theme is going to be. It will be something not necessarily so specific to an event. It'll be something more about Lincoln City this time. If you desire, I need to assign the staff. We had quite a few staff members that went to Portland during the entire week of the parade in order to put all the seeds and everything else on that. So it's a considerable amount of time. I just need to know if you're interested in going forward with it.
Well, one part of that discussion, because you and I sat in with their president of the Rose Festival, was it's also trying to draw the event to Lincoln City in ways. As we discussed that, it shouldn't. Their goal is not. It's the Oregon Rose Festival. They're trying to get everything just to Portland, and we talked to them about perhaps speedboat races during that time or dragon boat races in a cooperation. I thought we opened that door pretty well, and this is just one of those things I want to keep saying. Okay, we're still interested in being a part of that. So I've pled my case.
What does Ed say?
I don't think Ed, well, I shouldn't say I don't think, I know. He does not want to be the one who's solely responsible for it. It was quite a burden on his staff. And so we will probably be looking for a different department head to head that up and to spread the wealth a little bit. Yeah, and create the group that will work on it, because it is considerable staff time associated with it.
Yes, please.
I think that this year we know our expectations a little bit more, and we might be able to get more volunteers rather than all city staff.
That'd be great. If we could, that would be fantastic.
Because that seems to be the goal, is we can kick it off and then transfer it off to people. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to see open it up to the public to see, if we get a good response from individuals and see if they want to do it, and if we have sufficient volunteers, let's go forward. But if it's just going to be staff time.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to say there's a deadline.
If there's, right, here's what we want to do, this is the theme, do people want to come in?
And a fundraising
right.
element.
Right. If it's about Lincoln City, why doesn't Lincoln City people do it?
But we could still use VCB funds.
Absolutely.
That's where it's budgeted.
Yeah.
I know the Arts Committee is meeting this week. Maybe a mention to them maybe they could help with the design of it. I know they have some artistic folks on that group. And they would like to do something fun because, as I said before, Nikki's a taskmaster, so they might.
I do agree with Ron, though, because it's labor intensive. That day of the laying the seeds and the flowers and all that. I mean, we had a pretty minimalist float. I watched some of those other ones, like Sherwood's, of course, they went all out, and that's labor intensive, and we've got to have the volunteers, and I don't think the city should take it on. If the city people won't step up, well, then it should die. So I guess you have a consensus to move forward.
Is everybody okay with that?
Colleen, what do you think?
She wanted to volunteer.
She was one of those who were putting seeds on.
Open it up to the people.
No, please lie.
I was very involved with this last year. I spent a lot of time decorating, and I walked with the float in a Pixie Fest costume, the whole 9 yards. And I learned one thing: drink lots of water when you're walking that, because if you don't, you get really bad leg cramps after. I have an idea that has been floating in my head. I've kind of floated it with Ron. I think we have several events that could be promoted with it and integrated in a way. We've got the sandcastle building contest in the summer. We've got the 2 kite festivals, and we have the float ferry programs. Those are all things that are synonymous with Lincoln City. People identify with Lincoln City, and I think that's something that could be incorporated in a float where you have a sandcastle made of organic materials with kites flying off of it, the floats nestled within it with beach grass, so forth, and it promotes all of our city-sponsored events that we have here in Lincoln City. And you can put signage on it that says Kite Fest, June ... whatever the sand building, the date.
August 11th,
Thank you.
2018.
And so, I've got this vision in my head. I just don't know how to translate it into.
I guess what I'm thinking, what we're after is just more, since you participated, and is it still a viable thing to do with staff, or get to just we need more volunteers?
I think that we do need more volunteers, but I also think with the idea that's in my head, and if everybody likes it, a lot of that could be done here beforehand, because we can make the glass floats and do that stuff. I would be willing to volunteer my time on weekends to come to, the 4th floor to glue the organic matter on the floats to make them look like floats, and to glue all that organic matter. The only labor-intensive thing that will happen before is the actual flower installation on the float, and that doesn't have to be as intense as we did. And with the base that we already have, it's already got the waves on it, which is also something that identifies with Lincoln City, and the baby's breath is still there, and all the rice is still there. So that's some of the work that doesn't have to be done again. And then figure out, what do you want to have? We've got the 2 seats on the back. Do you want to have 2 people on the back, or
Those have got to go. We
get
almost
rid of
lost
them?
a tribe
I
member.
kind of think that they should go, and then you have a couple people walking with the flight, the kites, or, even maybe handing out a float here or there, or I don't know. Those are just some of my
Seats have to
ideas.
be moved back. We honestly did. Dad and I were there with the tribe during their parade, and we almost lost one of their elders because we hit a bump, and you're right on the edge of that thing.
The seating were not placed properly on it. They needed to be further back.
I have one
Colleen?
sentence.
Yes.
You need to spend more than $20 a night for the motel rooms.
Yeah, yes. No, I'm not going to depend on other people for recommendations. I'll go with my own in the future.
Last word.
And I just wanted to say, Colleen, that I had exactly the same idea for the float today, so it's a good one.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, though, I just can't help but jump in, because I'm not in favor of it. So you need to hear that. And part of the reason I say that is I still look at this nice 2-page document that Mr. Chandler gave us of all the things we've added on to staff. So there's a reason when we turned 50, the city did not take on the parade. And it's because it's staff or people intense and a lot of stuff. So what I heard you say, if the community comes out and does it, but not staff or city could be a financial contributor, but from there on, let it be the people.
Right, that's kind of the charter of the VCB. We'll incubate, you take it. We're not going to.
I still think there needs to be a staff member supervising, because there is the need for that. If we want to put it afloat that's really reflective of Lincoln City, we need to make sure that that seed's put on properly. It's not done half. And someone who is, because there is a map of how this stuff goes, and
We can get to that.
and we would need to send whoever, if those volunteers, we need to send them to the float making thing up in Portland so that they understand the detail that's involved in this, because it is a lot.
To finish there, Mr. Anderson. Good. Okay.
I too think we should do things locally. I think we have a great opportunity with the robotics coming in our swim pool coming up in April, and I think we would have more community participation if we're something like right here. And I feel it's more important to focus on things in our community rather than shipping them off to Portland. I know it's very fun, but it's a long ways away, and it's a lot of work and energy, and so I'm not in agreement with this plan.
Just if I could, I think the main reason I wanted to talk to the president of the Rose Festival, and then Ron was part of that too, was to bring them to us. That was part of my goal. So I agree with you, and then I don't agree with you.
Mr. Mayor, it might be a good idea to have a vote on this so that I get a very clear direction.
Okay, sure.
Say one more thing. Remember that Portland, by a huge margin, is our target market.
And how much money do we spend targeting that market with VCB marketing? I mean,
how much money do you spend, or do I spend
we
as a
spend?
person
The
that pays the
city.
TRT
Let's
tax?
go ahead and take that. Let's wrap it up here.
But
Mr.
it's-
Anderson? Yes, no?
No.
Casper?
No.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's going to be it for tonight, folks. I forget where I'm at. May God bless you all. May God bless Lincoln City. We are adjourned.
It's a chance for
Mics are off.